Hey guys, imagine this. You're a young boy in ancient Athens thinking life's all about philosophy and olive oil, when suddenly your mentor decides education means something way more hands-on, and I mean horrifyingly so. Welcome to the twisted underbelly of ancient Greece, where gods frolicked like frat boys and mortals paid the price in ways that make modern scandals look tame. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear might make you question if democracy was worth it. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Oh, ancient Greece, the cradle of Western civilization, birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and theater. We romanticize it with images of marble statues, wise old men in togas debating ethics, and heroic warriors clashing shields under the sun. But peel back that glossy veneer, and what do you find? A society where sex wasn't just a private affair. It was woven into the fabric of daily life, religion, politics, and even education. And let me tell you, it was horrifying. Not in the jump scare horror movie sense, but in that slow burn existential dread way, where you realize survival back then meant navigating a minefield of exploitation, absurdity, and outright cruelty, all under the guise of cultural norms. Let's start at the beginning, or at least as far back as we can without getting lost in the myths. Picture yourself in the 5th century BCE, Athens at its peak. You're not some godlike figure. You're probably a slave, a woman, or a kid just trying to make it through the day without becoming someone's plaything. Sex in ancient Greece wasn't about love or equality. It was about power, hierarchy, and keeping the social order intact. And boy, did they have creative ways to enforce that. First off, let's talk pederasty. Back then, what today would be condemned as outright abuse was dressed up as tradition. In ancient Greece, relationships between older men and adolescent boys were framed as education or mentorship. Your parents ship you off to be mentored by an older man, usually in his 20s or 30s, who's supposed to teach you the ways of citizenship, warfare, and virtue. But mentoring often included sexual relations. The Greeks called it paiderastia, from pais, meaning boy, and erastes, meaning lover. The older guy was the erastes, the dominant one, and the boy was the eramenos, the beloved. It was supposed to be educational. Yeah, right. Plato and Aristotle wrote about it like it was the height of sophistication, but let's call it what it was. A system that normalized pedophilia under the banner of grooming future leaders. Socrates himself was infamous for his mentorships. In Plato's Symposium, they chat about love over wine, and it's all very intellectual until you realize they're debating the merits of sleeping with boys versus women. The ideal was that the relationship was chaste in theory, focused on spiritual and intellectual growth, but in practice, vase paintings from the era show explicit scenes of older men fondling boys during lessons. And if the boy resisted, social ostracism, survival meant playing along, smiling through the trauma, because refusing could mean no connections, no status, no future in the polis. Absurd, isn't it? These are the same guys who invented logic, yet they rationalized this nightmare as building character. But hey, don't think women had it any better. In fact, they had it worse. Way worse. Athenian women were basically property. Married off at 14 or 15 to men twice their age, their job was to produce heirs and stay invisible. Sex for them was duty, not pleasure. Adultery? If a woman cheated, she could be killed or sold into slavery. But a man? He could have mistresses, slaves, prostitutes, whatever, as long as he didn't bring shame to the household. The double standard was baked in. And let's not forget the hetairai, the high-class courtesans. They were educated, witty, and could attend symposia, those all-male drinking parties. But at what cost? They traded their bodies for influence, navigating a world where one wrong move meant destitution or worse. Speaking of symposia, those weren't your average keggers. Picture a room full of reclining men on couches, wine flowing like the Nile, flute girls playing tunes, and discussions turning from politics to poetry to, well, who gets to bed whom? Sex was performative here. Male guests would often engage with young male slaves or prostitutes right there, in front of everyone. It was a status thing, showing off your conquests. And the wine? Mixed with water, but spiked with herbs that could act as aphrodisiacs or hallucinogens. Survival tip: if you're a slave serving at one of these, keep your wits about you, because refusing in advance could mean a beating or death. Now, let's zoom out to the gods, because nothing screams horrifying like divine role models who make mortal sins look quaint. Greek mythology is a soap opera of rape, incest, and bizarre transformations, all to justify human behavior. Zeus, king of the gods, was basically a serial rapist. He turned into a swan to seduce Leda, a bull for Europa, a shower of gold for Danae. Talk about creative assault. And the victims? They often got punished. Io was turned into a cow and hounded by a gadfly because Hera was jealous. Cassiopeia's daughter Andromeda chained to a rock for her mom's boasting. The gods set the tone. Power excuses everything. But wait, there's more absurdity in the rituals. Take the Dionysian festivals. Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy, had cults where women, the Maenads, would go into frenzied states, tearing animals, and sometimes men, apart in orgiastic rites. Was it empowering? Maybe for a moment, but survival meant channeling that rage or facing societal backlash. Men had their own versions, like the thesmophoria, but sex was always lurking, often violent. And prostitution, it was state-regulated. Solon, the great lawgiver, established brothels to protect free women by providing outlets for male lust. Slaves from conquered lands filled them. Thracian girls, Asian boys, bought cheap and worked to death. Prices were low. A quickie cost about the price of a loaf of bread. Diseases ran rampant. No protection, no rights. If you're a prostitute in ancient Athens, every day is a gamble with survival. Let's delve deeper into pederasty, because it's the elephant in the Parthenon. The relationship was supposed to end when the boy grew a beard, sign of manhood, at around 18. Then he'd become an Erastes himself, perpetuating the cycle. But what if feelings lingered? Society frowned on it. Adult male-male relationships were seen as unmanly if you were the passive partner. Penetration was about dominance. The penetrator was superior, the penetrated inferior. So, in war, raping enemy soldiers was a way to humiliate them. Absurd logic, the same act that educated boys degraded adults. Vase art tells the tale. Hundreds of black figure and red figure pots show Erastes courting a Romanoi with gifts like hares or roosters. Romantic? Sure, if you ignore the power imbalance. Boys were taught to be coy, to accept but not enjoy too much, lest they seem effeminate. The pain of survival, suppress your trauma, perform your role, or be labeled a barbarian. Women's sexuality, repressed to the max. Medical texts by Hippocrates claimed women needed sex to stay healthy. Something about wandering womb causing hysteria, but only within marriage. Masturbation, taboo, lesbianism existed, but Sappho's poems from Lesbos are our main clue, and even those were censored later. In Sparta, things were different. Women had more freedom, trained naked like men, but sex was still about breeding strong warriors. If your husband was away at war, he might send a buddy to impregnate you. Practical? Yes. Horrifying? Absolutely. Slavery amplified the horror. Most households had slaves, and they were fair game sexually. No consent needed. Female slaves bore children who became more slaves. Male slaves faced castration, or worse if they stepped out of line. The mines of Lorien? Thousands of slaves toiling naked, abused in every way, dying young. Survival? Ha, barely. Religion twisted it further. Aphrodite, goddess of love, had temples with sacred prostitutes, hierodula, who serviced worshippers as a form of devotion. In Corinth, the temple of Aphrodite reportedly had over 1,000. Was it voluntary? For some free women, maybe, but most were slaves dedicated as children. Sex as sacrifice. Talk about divine absurdity. And the myths kept coming. Poseidon raping Medusa in Athena's temple, turning her into a monster. Apollo pursuing Daphne until she becomes a tree to escape. Hades kidnapping Persephone. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were cautionary tales reinforcing that women and boys were prizes, not people. But let's not forget the phallus obsession. Greek art is full of it. Herm statues with erect penises guarding crossroads, satyr plays with giant fake ones for comedy. Fertility festivals like the Haloa involved women handling phallic symbols, mocking men while drunk. Ironic freedom in a patriarchal nightmare. As we wrap this first dive, wait, no, we're just getting started. Think about the Olympic Games. Athletes competed naked, oiled up, in front of crowds. Sexual tension? Palpable. Winners got olive wreaths and hero status, often leading to admirers of all ages. Survival in this world meant adapting to the absurdity. A boy grows up, mentors another, represses the pain. A woman bears sons, hopes they survive the system. A slave endures, dreams of freedom that's rarely granted. But hey, drop a comment. What's the most shocking thing you've heard so far? Would you time travel to ancient Greece knowing this? Let's keep the conversation going. Now, imagine the battlefield. Sex didn't stop at home, it followed to war. The sacred band of Thebes, 150 pairs of male lovers fighting side by side, supposedly unbreakable because they die for each other. Romantic? Sure, until you realize it was born from the same pederastic roots. Plato praised it, but the horror is in the expectation. Love as a weapon, vulnerability exploited. In sieges, rape was standard. When Troy fell, women like Cassandra were dragged off as concubines. Agamemnon takes her, she prophesies his death. Poetic justice, but too late for the victims. Back in the city, education for girls? Minimal. They learned household skills, maybe music, but sex ed was marry young, obey. Boys got the full package, including those mentorships. Theater reflected it all. Aristophanes' comedies like Lysistrata, women withholding sex to end war. Hilarious, but underscoring how sex was power, even if women rarely wielded it. Tragedies, Oedipus sleeping with his mom, incest horror, Medea killing her kids after Jason cheats. Pain of betrayal amplified. Philosophy tried to make sense of it. Aristotle said women were incomplete men, good for reproduction. Plato's Republic proposed communal wives for guardians, utopian or dystopian. But enough overview, let's get specific with historical figures. Pericles, Athens' golden boy, had Aspasia, a hetaira who influenced policy. Scandalous, she was foreign, smart, sexual. Accused of procuring prostitutes, she survived by wit. Alcibiades, beautiful and bisexual, seduced men and women, betrayed Athens multiple times. His charm, rooted in that Greek ideal of beauty equaling virtue, even when it hid vice. Sparta again, boys taken at 7 for a gogue. Harsh training, including sexual elements with older mentors. Girls wrestled naked, but marriage rituals involved kidnapping the bride, shaving her head, dressing her as a boy, symbolic pederasty twist. The pain. Imagine a Spartan mother sending her son to war with return, with your shield or on it. No room for weakness, including emotional scars from abuse. Prostitution details, porn-eye in brothels, olatrides, flute girls at parties, multi-talented but expendable. Taxes on them funded temples, state-sponsored horror. And health? No condoms, herbal abortifacients risky. Syphilis wasn't around, but other STDs were. Hippocrates treated women's diseases with fumigation, smoke up the vagina. Absurd medicine for absurd times. Myths continued. Hermaphroditus merged with a nymph into intersex. Celebrated? Or explained away differences. Pan, goat god chasing nymphs, symbolizing wild lust. Festivals with flagellation, whipping for fertility. As we hit the midpoint of this part, ponder, was it all bad? Some say Greek openness to homosexuality was progressive, but context, it was male-centric, exploitative, women loving women, marginalized, Lesbos and Sappho. Her poems speak of desire for girls, but she was married, had kids. Was it pederasty-like? Girls' education involved older women mentors, possibly sexual. Survival for LGBTQ in antiquity, hidden, coded, or punished if not fitting the norm. Now, art, sculptures like the Aphrodite of Knidos, first nude female statue, caused scandals. Men tried to interact with it, objectification literal. Vases, explicit scenes from orgies to bestiality. Minotaurs, anyone? Literature, Homer's Iliad has Achilles and Patroclus, lovers or friends. Debate rages, but grief suggests deep bond. Odyssey. Odysseus sleeps with Circe, Calypso, while Penelope waits faithfully. Double standard epic. Religion. Priapus, god with massive erection, warding evil. Gardens full of his statues. Phallic guardians. Festivals like Anthesteria. Wine, ghosts, sex, kids swinging on swings for fertility. The horror builds. Imagine being a medic, foreigner in Athens. Limited rights, but sexual exploitation, same. Or a helot in Sparta, slave class, hunted in Crypteia by young warriors, a rape part of the terror. Politics, sex scandals toppled leaders. Timarchus prosecuted by Aeschines for prostitution in youth, barring him from speaking in assembly. Law, adultery trials dramatic. Husband catches wife, can kill lover on spot. But women could divorce, keep dowry, small win. As we approach the end of part 1, let's tease part 2, the role of animals in myths. Yep, bestiality. More on temple sex, and how Romans copied but amped the horror. Comment below. If you could ask one ancient Greek about their sex life, who and why? Keep watching. Retention high if you're hooked on the absurdity. Alright, welcome back to our descent into the wild, twisted, and downright horrifying sexual practices of ancient Greece. If you thought part 1 was a roller coaster of absurdity and existential dread, buckle up, because we're about to crank the dial to 11. Picture yourself back in the dusty streets of Athens or the militaristic hills of Sparta, where every corner hides a new kind of scandal, ritual, or divine disaster that makes you question how humanity survived this era. We're diving deeper into the myths, the temples, the battlefields, and, yes, the animals. Because the Greeks didn't draw the line where you'd hope. Let's get to it. With that same sassy, ironic lens, exposing the pain and lunacy of surviving in a world where sex was both worship and weapon. We left off with the gods setting a terrible example. And trust me, they don't get better. Let's start with the animal angle, because nothing screams ancient Greece, like myths where humans and beasts get way too cozy. Take Zeus again. This guy couldn't keep it in his divine toga. In one story, he transforms into an eagle to snatch up Ganymede, a beautiful Trojan prince, to serve as his cupbearer and lover on Mount Olympus. Romantic? Hardly. Ganymede's ripped from his life. No consent, no choice. Just another mortal toy for the king of the gods. But it gets weirder. Ever heard of Pasiphae? Poor woman cursed by Poseidon to lust after a bull. Not just any bull, a magnificent white one sent by the sea god himself. She's so consumed that she commissions Daedalus, yes, the labyrinth guy, to build her a wooden cow costume so she can, consummate her desire. The result? The Minotaur, half man, half bull, a living reminder of divine pettiness and human suffering. Imagine the gossip in Crete. Did you hear about the queen and the bull? Survival tip. If a god curses you, just say no to carpentry projects. This wasn't just mythology, it reflected real attitudes. Bestiality pops up in art and stories, often as a punchline or a moral warning. But it's there. Vase paintings show satyrs, those half-goat, half-human party animals, chasing anything that moves, including actual goats. Satyr plays, the comedic relief after tragedies, often featured these horny creatures in exaggerated phallic costumes, humping their way through the plot. The audience laughed, but the subtext? Sex with animals wasn't unthinkable. It was just another boundary the Greeks flirted with. If you're a peasant tending livestock, you're not shocked. You're just praying Zeus doesn't take an interest in your flock. Now, let's pivot to the temples, where sex wasn't just sacred, it was a job. We touched on Aphrodite's temple prostitutes in part 1, but let's zoom in on Corinth, the Las Vegas of the ancient world. The temple of Aphrodite on the Acrocorinth supposedly employed thousands of hieroduloi, sacred slaves dedicated to the goddess. Pilgrims came from across Greece offering donations for divine favors. For the women, it was survival through servitude. Some were freeborn, choosing this life for status or money, but most were slaves, often children sold by desperate parents or captured in war. Their bodies were offerings, their lives expendable. Imagine the horror. You're 15, far from home, told your suffering pleases a goddess. Disease was rampant. Gonorrhea, chlamydia, no antibiotics. Life expectancy, don't ask. Yet the temple thrived, funding Corinth's wealth. Drop a comment. Would you rather face a minotaur or work in one of these temples? I'm curious. But it wasn't just Aphrodite. Other cults had their own flavors of sexual horror. Take the Orphic mysteries, secret rites tied to Dionysus and Orpheus. These involved ecstatic dances, wine-fueled orgies, and sometimes human sacrifice in the early days. Women, often marginalized elsewhere, could join as initiates, but the price? Total surrender to the frenzy. Stories describe maenads ripping apart animals or men in their trance. Was it empowerment or exploitation dressed up as divine communion? You decide, but survival meant losing yourself to the god's will. Warfare brought its own sexual nightmares. We mentioned the sacred band of Thebes, those lover soldiers, but let's talk about what happened when cities fell. Take the sack of Melos in 416 BCE. Athens crushed the island, killed the men, and enslaved the women and children. Sexual violence was standard. Enslaved women became concubines or worse, their bodies war trophies. In Homer's Iliad, this is explicit. Briseis and Chryseis, captured women, are fought over by Achilles and Agamemnon like prizes. No agency, no escape. If you're a woman in a besieged city, survival means enduring rape, slavery, or both. Men weren't spared either. Defeated soldiers were often sodomized to symbolize domination. Remember that penetrator-penetrated hierarchy? It wasn't just physical, it was psychological annihilation. Sparta deserves its own spotlight because their system was a different kind of horrifying. Unlike Athens, where women were cloistered, Spartan women had relative freedom, trained in athletics, educated to be witty. But it was all for the state. Their bodies were for breeding warriors, marriage rituals, straight out of a fever dream. The bride was kidnapped, symbolically, but still. Her head shaved, dressed in male clothing, and left in a dark room for the groom to claim her. Why the boyish disguise? Some say it eased the transition for men used to pederastic relationships. The pain. Even in marriage, women were props in a militaristic machine. And the men? Boys in the Agog, Sparta's brutal training system, faced sexual initiation from older mentors as part of their toughening. Refuse? You're weak, ostracized, maybe dead. Survival meant submission. Let's talk about the absurdity of Greek medicine and sex. Hippocrates and his buddies had wild ideas. They believed semen came from the brain, so excessive sex could make you stupid. Women's health? A mess of myths. The wandering womb theory said a woman's uterus could float around her body, causing hysteria unless fixed by sex or pregnancy. Treatment? Fumigation with herbs or even manual repositioning. Yes, doctors poking around with no clue. Contraception existed. Silphium, a now extinct plant, was so popular it was worth its weight in gold. But it was risky. Abortifacients like pennyroyal could kill you. If you're a woman trying to avoid pregnancy, good luck. The pain. Biology was destiny, and medicine was a gamble. Theater kept reflecting this madness. In Aristophanes' Thesmophoria Zeusi, women plot against Euripides for portraying them as lustful or murderous. Funny, but it highlights how women's sexuality was a punchline or a threat. Euripides' own plays, like Hippolytus, show the tragedy. Phaedra lusts after her stepson, cursed by Aphrodite, and it destroys everyone. The gods again pulling strings, leaving mortals to suffer. Let's not ignore the men who bucked the system. Alcibiades, that charming traitor, was a sexual wildcard. He seduced men, women, even Sparta's queen while exiled there, fathering a child and sparking a scandal. His beauty was his armor, but also his curse. Everyone wanted a piece of him, and he played it to survive. Then there's Diogenes, the cynic philosopher who rejected it all. He masturbated in public to prove he needed no one, saying, "If only hunger could be satisfied so easily." Hero or madman? You tell me, comment below. Would you vibe with Diogenes or run from his barrel? Art kept pushing boundaries. The worn cup, a silver goblet, technically Greco-Roman, shows explicit male-male scenes, one involving a boy watching through a door. Was it art or porn? Both. Temples displayed phallic sculptures. Herms with erect penises stood at every corner, protecting the city. Vandalizing them, like in 415 BCE, was a capital offense. Imagine the trial. You defaced a sacred penis. Absurd, but deadly serious. festivals got weirder. The Great Dionysia wasn't just theater. It involved phallic processions with giant wooden penises paraded through Athens. Women joined in, singing bawdy songs, mocking men's prowess. Was it rebellion, or just another role they had to play? The Haloa festival, for Demeter and Dionysus, had women handling dough shaped like genitals, laughing over wine. Freedom and jest, but the patriarchy still ruled. Slavery's horror deepened. In Athens, slaves were everywhere. Households, brothels, mines. Sexual access was a given. Female slaves bore children who inherited their status. Male slaves, especially young ones, were used like eromenoi, but without the social contract. In Athens, slaves were everywhere. Households, brothels, mines. Sexual access was a given. Female slaves bore children who inherited their status. Male slaves, especially young ones, were used like eromenoi, but without the social contract. Poorer families might offer sons to wealthy men for patronage, trading innocence for survival. Girls faced early marriage or temple service. The pain, childhood was a luxury few could afford. Politics and sex intertwined. Prostitution could ruin careers. Look at Timarchus, banned from public office for his youthful escapades. Yet politicians frequented brothels, and Hetairae, like Aspasia, wielded soft power. Aspasia, Pericles' lover, was mocked as a madam but respected for her intellect. Survival for her meant balancing desire and danger. Law courts saw sex scandals galore. Adultery cases were public spectacles. Husbands parading lovers' heads or worse. Rape laws? Harsh, but only if the victim was a citizen. Slaves and foreigners? No protection. Consent was a citizen's privilege. Myths kept feeding the horror. Actaeon, torn apart by his own dogs for seeing Artemis naked, punished for a glance. Tiresias, struck blind for seeing Athena bathing. The gods demanded purity but indulged in every vice. Homosexuality's complexity. Male-male relationships were fine in youth, but stigmatized in adulthood, unless you were the active partner. Lesbianism? Barely acknowledged outside Sappho's fragments. Her school on Lesbos trained girls, maybe in more than poetry. Survival for queer Greeks meant secrecy or conformity. Health risks piled up. No sanitation, no antibiotics. Brothel workers faced infections daily. Men too. Penile sores, described in medical texts, sound grim. Contraception failures meant high maternal mortality. The pain, every sexual act was a roll of the dice. Education reinforced it all. Boys learned pederasty's rules early. Accept gifts, play coy, endure. Girls learned submission through myths and marriage prep. Philosophy, it justified the system. Socrates' dialogues flirt with eroticism, framing it as intellectual pursuit. As we near the end of part 2, let's tease part 3. The countryside's darker rituals, more on Sparta's brutal system, and how Greek colonies spread these practices. Plus, how did kids cope in this world? Comment, what's the most absurd Greek practice you've heard so far? Would you survive a day in Athens or Sparta? Keep watching, this rabbit hole only gets deeper. Welcome back, intrepid explorers of history's dark side. If parts 1 and 2 left you reeling from the urban scandals of Athens and the divine debauchery of the gods, hold on to your togas, because now we're venturing into the shadowy countryside, where rural rituals turned sex into something straight out of a pagan nightmare. Imagine ditching the city lights for olive groves and mountain shrines, only to find that survival here meant dancing on the edge of fertility cults, animal sacrifices, and communal rites that make Burning Man look like a church picnic. We'll dig deeper into Sparta's iron-fisted system, explore how these horrors spread like wildfire through Greek colonies, and confront the gut-wrenching question: how on earth did kids cope in this twisted world? Let's plunge in with our signature blend of sarcasm, absurdity, and a hefty dose of empathy for those who endured it all. Let's kick off with the countryside, where the Greeks' agrarian roots fed into some of their most primal and horrifying sexual practices. Away from the polished marble of the Acropolis, life revolved around the land, the seasons, and appeasing gods who demanded blood, sweat, and other fluids. Take the Thesmophoria, a women-only festival honoring Demeter and Persephone. For 3 days in autumn, married women camped out in tents, fasting, mourning the goddess's loss, and performing secret rites. Sounds empowering? Sure, until you hear about the piglets thrown into pits to rot, then retrieved as fertilizer, symbolizing fertility but reeking of death. And the sexual element? Women handled models of genitals made from dough, shared body jokes, and possibly engaged in ritual masturbation or lesbian acts to awaken the earth. It was a rare space for female agency, but laced with absurdity. Imagine starving, surrounded by decay, forcing laughs about men's inadequacies just to ensure a good harvest. Survival meant embracing the gross, the taboo, because a bad crop equaled starvation. Deeper in the boonies, things got even wilder with the Arcadian cults. Arcadia, that idyllic shepherd's paradise in poetry, hid dark secrets. Worship of Pan, the horned, horny god of the wild, involved rustic orgies where shepherds and nymphs, or rather local girls dressed as such, frolicked in caves. But frolic often meant forced encounters, with flagellation using goatskins to spur fertility. Myths romanticize Pan chasing nymphs until they transform to escape, syrinx into reeds, for example. But reality, her rural women had little protection. If a shepherd claimed you in the name of the god, who would argue? The pain, isolation amplified vulnerability, turning nature's beauty into a trap. Animal involvement ramped up here too. Infertility rites for Dionysus or Demeter, bulls or goats were sacrificed, their blood mixed with seeds for planting. But some rituals hinted at more. Stories of women mating with animals in trance states echoing Pasiphae's myth. Was it literal? Probably not widespread, but vase fragments from rural sites show hybrid scenes, blurring lines between human and beast. Absurd? Utterly. Survival for a farmer's wife. Participate or risk divine wrath, and crop failure. Now, let's double down on Sparta, because their system wasn't just brutal. It was a masterclass in state-controlled sexuality. We skimmed the agage before, but imagine being a Spartan boy at 7, ripped from your mom, thrown into barracks for years of grueling training. We skimmed the agage before, but imagine being a Spartan boy at 7, ripped from your mom, thrown into barracks for years of grueling training. Girls fared slightly better, training naked in gyms to build strong bodies for birthing soldiers, but their sexuality was weaponized too. Pre-marriage, they might engage in same-sex play with mentors, preparing for duty. Weddings? As mentioned, the mock kidnapping, head-shaving, boy-drag disguise. It's like the state scripted your trauma to desensitize men from their pederastic past. Post-marriage, if your hubby couldn't perform, war stress anyone? He'd invite a comrade to step in. Polyandry was common, brothers sharing wives to consolidate land. The horror, your body isn't yours, it's Sparta's. Survival meant producing heirs or facing shame, exile, or death in childbirth. No coddling here. Kids in this mess? Heartbreaking. In Athens, boys entered pederasty around 12, girls married at 14, childhood over in a blink. Coping mechanisms. Repression, mostly. Myths and education indoctrinated them. Boys learned Homer's tales of heroic bonds, Achilles and Patroclus, likely lovers, normalizing it. Girls heard stories of dutiful wives like Penelope, ignoring the subtext of endurance. Trauma? Buried under stoicism. Spartan kids had it harsher. No toys, just survival drills. Boys stole food to eat, got whipped if caught, all while navigating sexual hierarchies. Imagine the psychological scars. Trust shattered early, intimacy twisted into power plays. Some historians argue it built resilience, but let's be real, it's institutionalized abuse. Drop a comment. How do you think modern therapy would handle an ancient Greek kid? I'd pay to see that session. As Greece expanded, these practices hitched a ride to colonies from Sicily to the Black Sea. Take Magna Graecia in Italy. Cities like Tarentum exported pederasty wholesale, with local twists. In Syracuse, tyrants like Dionysius I hosted symposia, rivaling Athens, complete with imported hetairai and boy entertainers. But colonization amplified horrors. Conquered natives became slaves, fueling brothels. In Massalia, modern Marseille, Greek settlers mixed with Celts, blending rites, perhaps adding druidic elements to fertility cults, making them even more eclectic and terrifying. Survival for colonists. Impose your norms or assimilate, but sex remained the glue or the chains holding society together. back to religion's rural grip. The Eleusinian mysteries, near Athens but countryside vibes, promised afterlife bliss through secret rites. Initiates drank kykeon, a possibly hallucinogenic brew, witnessed dramas of Demeter and Persephone, kidnapping, loss, reunion. Sexual symbolism abounded, phallic shapes, references to sacred unions. Some speculate orgiastic elements, especially in later versions. The pain, secrecy meant death for spoilers, and the emotional roller coaster left participants changed, hopefully for the better, but often haunted. Philosophy tried intervening, but even out here, it justified the madness. Pythagoras' cult in Croton, a colony, preached asceticism, but rumors of sacred sex among initiates persist. Women were admitted, progressive, but under strict hierarchies. Aristotle, from the north, viewed rural folk as barbaric, their rites primitive, yet he endorsed the urban versions. The irony, thinkers fleeing cities for contemplation still carried the cultural baggage. Art from colonies shows evolution, or devolution. Sicilian vases depict wilder scenes, more bestiality hints, exaggerated orgies, perhaps influenced by Etruscan neighbors. Temples in Selinus had metopes with explicit myths, like Zeus as a swan. The absurdity, exporting horror, then amplifying it with local flavors. Health in the hinterlands? Worse than cities. No Hippocratic doctors roaming farms. Folk remedies ruled. For hysteria, rural women used herbal pessaries or animal-based cures, risky as hell. STDs spread via traveling merchants or soldiers. Childbirth? Often fatal, with midwives invoking gods mid-scream. Theater reached colonies, too. In Syracuse, massive amphitheaters hosted Greek plays, spreading the sexual satire. Imagine locals watching Lysistrata, laughing at withheld sex-ending wars, while their own women had zero say. Historical figures in exile brought spice. Alcibiades, fleeing to Sparta, then Thrace, spread his bisexual charisma, influencing local customs. In colonies, Hetairai like Thais followed Alexander's conquests. Wait, that's later, but Greek colonies set the stage, turning sex into conquest tools. Slavery's rural face, vast estates worked by helot-like serfs. Owners abused at will, no urban oversight. Kids born into it faced the cycle from birth. Myths adapted. In Crete, Minotaur lore justified bull dances. Youths vaulting beasts, sexual tension high. Survival, dodge horns, please crowds, or end up sacrificed. Festivals rural style, the Carnaia in Sparta with young men dancing naked, phallic games. Or the Hyacinthia mourning a boy's death, Apollo's lover, turning grief into erotic reenactments. Queer coping, in colonies, away from Athens' scrutiny, perhaps more freedom, but still risky. Sappho's influence lingered in lesbian colonies. Her poems coded escapes. Politics, colonial tyrants used sex for control. Gelon of Syracuse married off daughters strategically, but scandals abounded, affairs leading to coups. Law, harsher in outposts, adultery, stoning possible, but enforcement spotty, leading to vigilante horrors. As we wrap part 3, ponder the spread. Greece's gifts to the world included these nightmares, paving for Rome. Tease for part 4, Roman twists, legacy in modern times, and was any of it progressive? Comment, could you hack it in rural Greece or a colony? What's the wildest ritual here? Retention tip, stick around, the finale ties it all together. Alright, brave souls, we've reached the final act of our sordid journey through the sexual underbelly of ancient Greece. If you've survived the urban scandals of Athens, the militaristic madness of Sparta, and the rural rituals that made goats blush, congratulations, you're tougher than a hoplite's shield. Now, we're tying it all together, zooming out to see how Rome took Greece's horrifying practices and turned the dial to gladiatorial levels of excess, while asking, did any of this leave a legacy worth salvaging, or was it just a millennia-long fever? Dream? We'll also wrestle with whether any of these practices could be called progressive by modern standards, all while keeping the irony sharp and the pain of survival front and center. Let's dive into the grand finale, where the absurdity hits its peak and the horrors echo into eternity. First, let's fast forward to Rome, because when the Greeks exported their culture, the Romans didn't just adopt it, they supercharged it like a chariot on steroids. Rome idolized Greek art, philosophy, and yes, their sexual playbook, but they added their own imperial flair. Pederasty? The Greeks' noble mentorship became crasser in Rome. Elite men like Emperor Tiberius took it to extremes, allegedly keeping a harem of boys on Capri for private games. Survival for a Roman youth meant navigating the same power imbalances as in Greece, but now with the added terror of imperial whim. Refuse a senator? You might end up in the Tiber River, not just ostracized. Vase art gave way to frescoes. Pompeii's walls are plastered with explicit scenes from orgies to bestiality, showing the Greeks' influence but with less pretense of education. The Lupercalia festival, Rome's version of a Greek fertility rite, had naked men whipping women with leather straps to boost fertility. Romantic? Sure, if you like your romance with a side of public flogging. Women's lot didn't improve much. In Rome, like Athens, marriage was a contract, not a love story. Romantic? Sure, if you like your romance with a side of public flogging. Women's lot didn't improve much. In Rome, like Athens, marriage was a contract, not a love story. Meanwhile, Roman matrons faced the same double standards. Husbands could visit prostitutes or slaves, but a wife's infidelity meant exile or death. The poet Ovid, in his Ars Amatoria, gave men tips on seduction while warning women to stay pure. Classic hypocrisy. Survival for a Roman woman. Smile, obey, and hope your husband doesn't trade you for a newer model. Prostitution? Rome turned it into an industry. The Greeks had state-regulated brothels, but Rome's lupanars, literally wolf dens, were grim. Slaves, often Greek captives, worked in tiny cells, their names and prices scrawled on walls. Pompeii's ruins show these setups, claustrophobic, disease-ridden, with crude graffiti boasting of conquests. Male prostitutes, called spintri, served both men and women, often branded or tattooed to mark their status. The pain, no escape, no rights, just endless transactions until you broke. Comment below. Would you rather be a Greek hetaira or a Roman lupanar worker? Neither's a picnic, but I'm curious. Religion kept the Greek flavor but got darker. The Bacchanalia, Rome's take on Dionysian rites, was so wild, orgies, murders, conspiracies, that the Senate banned it in 186 BCE, executing thousands. Priapus, the phallic god, was even bigger, pun intended, in Rome, with statues guarding every garden and brothel. Sex as worship persisted, but Rome's scale made it industrial. Think temple prostitutes on steroids, servicing legions of soldiers and merchants. Myths evolved too. Rome adopted Greek stories but added gore. Ovid's Metamorphoses retells Greek rapes, Daphne, Io, Europa, but with more explicit violence. The god's lust became a Roman soap opera, justifying mortal excess. Bestiality? Still there. Frescoes show women with satyrs or centaurs, and Emperor Nero allegedly took it to grotesque extremes per Suetonius' scandalous gossip. Slavery's horror scaled up. Rome's empire meant millions of captives. Greeks, Gauls, Africans funneled into brothels or households. Sexual abuse was a given. Slaves were property, their bodies disposable. Gladiators, often slaves, were sexualized too. Crowds lusted after their bodies, and wealthy patrons rented them post-fight. Survival, fight, perform, endure, repeat. Kids in Rome? Same grim story. Boys faced pederasty, girls' early marriage or temple service. Coping meant dissociation or defiance. Some turned to stoicism, others to rebellion, but most just survived by shutting down. The pain. Childhood was a myth, replaced by adult horrors. Now, let's grapple with the big question. Was any of this progressive? Some modern scholars point to Greece's openness to homosexuality as a win. Same-sex relationships were visible, even celebrated, unlike later eras. But context matters. Pederasty wasn't about equality, it was power, with boys as pawns. Lesbianism, like Sappho's, existed in shadows, barely acknowledged. Women's brief freedoms in festivals like the Thesmophoria were state-sanctioned outlets, not empowerment. The Greeks normalized sex in ways we'd now call exploitative, but they also lacked our moral frameworks. Calling it progressive is like calling gladiators athletes. Technically true, but missing the blood. Drop a comment. Do you think any Greek practice could be seen as progressive, or was it all just horror? The legacy? It's complicated. Greek ideas about sex as power shaped Rome, which shaped Western law and culture. The double standards, men free, women bound, lingered for centuries. Pederasty's echoes persisted in medieval apprenticeships, though less overtly sexual. Homosexuality's acceptance waned under Christianity, but the Greeks' openness left a faint blueprint for later liberation movements. Art and literature, from Renaissance nudes to Freud's Oedipus complex, Greece's sexual lens still haunts us. Even democracy, their golden gift, was built on a society where only free men had voices. Women, slaves, and kids silenced by the same system that birthed freedom. Back to Greece for a final reflection. Survival in this world was a gauntlet. Boys learned to suppress trauma to become citizens. Women navigated marriage or prostitution, their bodies never their own. Slaves endured unimaginable abuse, their lives cheap. The gods offered no mercy, their stories normalizing rape and betrayal. Yet, amidst the horror, there were glimmers: Sappho's poetry, Aristophanes' satire, Diogenes' defiance, that hint at human resilience. They laughed, loved, and rebelled, even if the system crushed most. Specifics tie it together. Take Aspasia, Pericles' lover, who wielded influence despite her status as a hetaira. Or Phryne, a courtesan whose trial for impiety ended with her baring her breasts to the jury, acquitted because beauty equaled virtue. Absurd, but effective. Alcibiades' bisexual escapades destabilized empires, showing sex as politics. Even Socrates, executed for corrupting youth, flirted with boys in his dialogues, blurring mentorship and desire. Health's final note: Greek medicine's absurdities, semen from the brain, wandering wombs, fed into Roman quackery, delaying progress for centuries. STDs ravaged unchecked, contraception a deadly gamble. Survival meant dodging biology's traps. Art's legacy: Greek vases inspired Roman mosaics, which inspired Renaissance painters. The nude, born in Greece, became art's obsession, but always male gaze-centric. Theater: Aristophanes' sex jokes still echo in modern comedy, though we've mostly ditched the phallic props. Festival's impact: Rome's Saturnalia, with its role reversals and debauchery, owes a debt to Dionysian excess. Modern carnivals, Mardi Gras, anyone, carry the DNA. Politically, sex scandals never stopped. Rome's emperors, from Caligula's alleged incest to Nero's public orgies, took Greek drama to new heights. Law: Rome codified Greek norms, adultery punished but only for women. Slaves remained voiceless. The countryside's rituals fed Rome's rural cults like Ceres worship, with more blood and sex. Colonies spread it further. Greek Alexandria's Serapeum had sacred prostitutes, a direct import. Queer legacy: Greece's male-male bonds inspired Roman poets like Catullus, but Christianity buried it. Sappho's fragments survived, fueling feminist readings today. As we close, imagine living then. A boy, groomed by a mentor, hiding fear. A girl, married off, praying for a kind husband. A slave, used and discarded. The gods laugh, the polis thrives, and you endure. That's the Greek miracle, not democracy, but survival against a system that saw bodies as tools. Final comment challenge: what's the one Greek or Roman practice you'd ban if you could time travel? And would you dare live in their world for a day? Share below. This series thrived on your engagement. This is the end, folks. 4 parts, 8,000 plus words of horror, absurdity, and resilience. Greece gave us philosophy, but at what cost? Thanks for sticking with me. Until the next dive into history's shadows. 4 parts, 8,000 plus words of horror, absurdity, and resilience. Greece gave us philosophy, but at what cost? Thanks for sticking with me. Until the next dive into history's shadows. Imagine waking up in the dead of night, heart pounding, as a saber-toothed tiger's hot breath ghosts over your face. Yeah, that's not a nightmare. That's Tuesday for your average caveman. But here's the kicker: if you were sleeping alone, you weren't waking up at all. Welcome to Why Cavemen Never Slept Alone, It Could Kill You, where we dive into the hilarious horror show of prehistoric survival. Buckle up, because this is going to make your cozy bed feel like a 5-star resort. And hey, if you've ever camped alone and heard a twig snap, drop a comment below. What's the scariest sound you've heard at night? Let's see if it beats a woolly mammoth stampede. Ah, the Stone Age, that golden era of human history where every day was a brutal game of survive or become lunch. Picture this, it's 20,000 years ago and you're Ugg, a rugged Homo sapiens with a fashionable beard made of actual bear fur, because, well, you killed the bear or it killed you. No middle ground. You're huddled in a damp cave that smells like wet dog mixed with regret, surrounded by your ragtag family of grunting relatives. Why? Because sleeping solo was basically signing your own death warrant. And trust me, death back then came in more flavors than a prehistoric ice cream parlor. If ice cream parlors served up venomous snakes and hyena ambushes, let's start at the beginning, shall we? The Paleolithic period, that fancy term for the Old Stone Age, wasn't just about chipping rocks into tools and painting stick figures on walls. No, it was a non-stop festival of existential dread. Humans had just figured out fire, but fire couldn't save you from everything, especially not when the night fell and the world outside your flickering torchlight turned into a predator's playground. You think modern insomnia is bad? Try dozing off knowing that a cave bear, a beast twice the size of today's grizzlies, with claws like steak knives, might decide your snoring sounds like an invitation to dinner. But why never sleep alone? Let's unpack this absurdity with a hefty dose of sarcasm. First off, the wildlife. Oh, the wildlife. In today's world, the biggest threat to your sleep might be a neighbor's yappy dog or that one mosquito that evades every swat. Back then, it was a veritable zoo of death. Saber-toothed cats, those smilodon fellas with fangs longer than your forearm, prowled the shadows, waiting for any lone straggler to nod off. These weren't your cute house cats. These were apex predators that could leap from a tree and turn you into a kebab before you could grunt, "Help." And don't get me started on the dire wolves. Packs of them, smarter than your average politician, coordinating hunts like a furry SWAT team. If you were alone, you'd be the midnight snack special. Historical records, or what we have of them, scraped from bones and cave art, paint a picture of pure paranoia. Archaeologists have dug up sites like the Lascaux caves in France, where early humans left behind murals not of peaceful picnics, but of massive beasts charging through the landscape. It's like they were saying, "Hey, future generations, remember that time we almost got trampled by a herd of aurochs? Good times." Sleeping in groups meant more eyes, more ears, and more clubs to swing when something went bump in the night. One person nods off. Fine, as long as Aunt Uga is on watch, poking the fire and scanning for glowing eyes in the dark. But the pain of survival wasn't just about the big bad animals. Oh no, the environment itself was a sadistic jerk. Imagine trying to catch some Z's on a bed of jagged rocks, with temperatures plummeting to sub-zero because the Ice Age didn't believe in central heating. Hypothermia was a real party pooper. Your body heat drops and suddenly you're a human popsicle. Sleeping alone? You'd freeze faster than a bad idea in a boardroom. But huddle up with your clan, sharing body warmth like a prehistoric group hug, and you might just make it to dawn. It's ironic, isn't it? Today we pay therapists to talk about personal space issues, but back then, invading personal space was the key to not dying. And let's talk about the absurdity of it all. These cavemen weren't just surviving, they were innovating in the most ridiculous ways. Take the invention of the family unit, not for Hallmark cards and minivans, but for sheer necessity. You had kids? Great, more tiny sentinels to cry at the first sign of danger. Elders? They might not run fast, but their stories of that one time a mammoth stepped on Uncle Grug kept everyone vigilant. It was a system born of blood, sweat, and a lot of terrified tears. One wrong nap alone, and poof, you're out of the gene pool. Diving deeper into the nightmare, consider the human threats. Yeah, because animals weren't enough. Your fellow Homo sapiens could be just as deadly. Tribal warfare was a thing, even back then. Rival groups raiding for resources, women, or just because they didn't like your cave's decor. Sleeping alone? You might wake up to a spear in your gut from some sneaky neighbor who wanted your flint collection. Groups meant safety in numbers. A chorus of snores that masked individual vulnerability, and a ready mob to fend off intruders. It's like nature's way of saying, "Hey, humans, you're squishy and slow. Stick together or get picked off like low-hanging fruit." Archaeological evidence backs this up with a twisted sense of humor. Sites like Shanidar Cave in Iraq show Neanderthals, our burly cousins, burying their dead with flowers, suggesting they cared enough to mourn, but also implying life was so harsh that death was a frequent visitor. One skeleton there had injuries that healed over time, meaning someone nursed him back to health. Alone, he'd have been Hyena Chow. It's poignant, really. The pain of watching loved ones suffer, all while knowing solitude was suicide. But let's inject some historical absurdity here. Imagine the daily routine. Wake up if you survive the night, hunt for food that fights back, gather berries that might poison you, then crash in a pile with your smelly kin. No Netflix, no memory foam mattresses, just the constant ache of bruises from yesterday's near misses. And the bugs. Oh, the bugs. Lice, ticks, fleas. Your body was a walking buffet. Sleeping alone meant no one to pick them off your back, literally. It's like evolution's cruel joke. Survive the saber-tooth, but itch to death instead. As we peel back the layers of this prehistoric hellscape, think about the psychological toll. Modern humans get anxious about emails. Cavemen had PTSD from every rustle in the bushes. Sleeping in groups fostered bonds, sure, but it also meant dealing with Uncle Thog's thunderous farts or Baby Zug's midnight wails. Yet, that cacophony was comfort, proof you weren't alone in the void. Ironic, isn't it? In a world where silence meant danger, noise was your best friend. Fast forward a bit, or backward, since we're time traveling here, to the Mesolithic era, that awkward teen phase between stone ages. Humans are getting smarter, building semi-permanent shelters, but the threats, still lurking. Now you've got wolves domesticating themselves into dogs, which is great for alarms, but early on, those proto-pups were just as likely to steal your dinner as guard it. Sleeping alone with a half-wild mutt, recipe for a mangled morning. And the weather, Mother Nature's mood swings were legendary. Flash floods, blizzards, earthquakes, all without warning. A group could relocate or rebuild, a loner, buried under rubble or swept away. It's the ultimate survival irony. Humans, the so-called top of the food chain, spending millennia cowering in clusters because individualism was a death sentence. Let's pause for a moment of sarcastic reflection. Today, we romanticize the lone wolf archetype, the rugged individual forging their path. But in caveman times, the lone wolf was just lunch. Real survival meant swallowing your pride and snuggling up to whoever was handy. No dating apps, just hey, you alive? Cool, let's not die together. Engaging with this madness, picture yourself there. What would you do? Hunt mammoths with a sharpened stick? Or hide in the cave, hoping the group doesn't boot you for being useless? Drop a comment. If you were a caveman, what's the one modern invention you'd kill for? Indoor plumbing, coffee, tell me below. Let's build a time machine wish list. Moving on, the evolution of sleep itself is a riot. Scientists today debate REM cycles and sleep hygiene. Back then, it was don't get eaten hygiene. Studies of modern hunter-gatherers like the Hadza in Tanzania show they sleep in groups, waking frequently to stoke fires or check for threats. It's a fragmented slumber, but it works. Because alone, that fragmentation turns fatal. Historical absurdity peaks with the megafauna. We're talking giant sloths the size of elephants, armadillos like tanks, and birds with wingspans that could block the sun. The Haast's eagle in New Zealand hunted humans like we hunt chickens. Sleeping alone under the stars, you'd be eagle takeout. Groups meant shared vigilance, rotated watches, a primitive security system powered by fear and flint. But the pain? Oh, the unrelenting pain. Broken bones from falls, infections from cuts, and no antibiotics, remember. Starvation when hunts failed. Sleeping alone amplified it all. No one to share the load, literally. Carrying an injured comrade, group effort, alone, crawl or die. Let's explore a day in the life to really hammer home the sarcasm. Dawn breaks. You stir from the human puppy pile, bones aching from the cold ground. Breakfast, if you're lucky, leftover marrow from yesterday's kill. Then off to forage, dodging venomous critters and rival tribes. Lunch, berries that might give you the runs. Afternoon, craft tools while swatting flies. Evening, hunt where one wrong move means impalement on a bison horn. Night falls, the real terror hour. Huddle time. Stories around the fire, not fairy tales, but survival hacks. Remember Grok? Slept alone after a fight, found his bones scattered by morning. Laughter, grim chuckles because humor was the only coping mechanism. Ironic twist, this group sleeping birthed society. Language evolved from grunts to warnings, art from boredom in caves, culture from shared nightmares. But at what cost? The constant vigilance eroded sanity. No wonder early myths are full of monsters. They were real. As we wrap this first chunk of prehistoric pandemonium, remember, cavemen never slept alone because solitude was synonymous with stupidity. Or death. Same thing. The world was a meat grinder, and humans were the squishy bits clinging together to avoid the blades. But we're just getting started. In the next part, we'll dive into the Neolithic nightmare, farming, settlements, and how sleeping alone still spelled doom amid new absurdities like plagues and property disputes. Stick around, and hey, if this hooked you, smash that like button and comment your biggest fear from the Stone Age. Was it the tigers, the cold, or the in-laws? Let's chat in the comments. Your survival stories might just inspire the next episode. Alright, strap in for round 2 of why cavemen never slept alone. It could kill you. If you thought the Paleolithic was a savage circus, wait till you see the Neolithic era, where humans traded one set of nightmares for another, shinier set, complete with farming, fails in the dawn of who owns this dirt drama. Picture this. You're trying to nap, but instead of a saber-tooth, it's your neighbor's cow trampling your barley crop. Or worse, a plague from sleeping too close to said cow. Grab your virtual spears, because we're diving back into the sarcastic, absurd, and downright painful world of prehistoric survival. And hey, drop a comment. What's the worst neighbor you've ever had? Let's see if they beat a Neolithic jerk stealing your goats. So the Neolithic, roughly 10,000 years ago. Humans decide they're tired of chasing mammoths and getting mauled. Genius idea. Let's grow food instead. Sounds like progress, right? Wrong. Farming was less Old MacDonald and more Old MacDonald had a mental breakdown. You're still not sleeping alone because, surprise, the world's still out to get you. Only now, it's not just predators, it's pests, plagues, and the guy next door who swears his fence line includes your best wheat patch. Let's set the scene. You're now Zug, proud owner of a mud brick hut in one of those fancy new settlements like Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey. Your house is a glorified dirt box with no windows, because who needs fresh air when you've got smoke from a fire pit choking you 24/7? You're sleeping on a reed mat, luxury upgrade from the Paleolithic rock bed, but you're still piled in with your entire extended family. Why? Because sleeping alone is still a one-way ticket to the afterlife, and the afterlife's guest list is already overcrowded. First up, the environment's still a sadistic prankster. The ice age is thawing, but that just means floods, mudslides, and unpredictable weather that drowns your crops or bakes them to dust. You're not freezing to death anymore. Congrats. But now you're sweating buckets in a hut with zero ventilation. Hypothermia's out, heat stroke's in, sleeping in a group, still your best bet for body heat regulation, or frankly, just having someone to complain to when the roof leaks. Alone? You're a sweaty, lonely popsicle by morning, or worse, buried under a collapsed mud wall. But the real kicker, farming introduced a whole new buffet of misery. You're slaving away, plowing fields with a stick, because the wheel is still a few millennia off, and your crops are a magnet for every pest from locusts to rats. These aren't modern rats, these are Neolithic super rats, bold enough to steal your dinner right off your plate. And disease? Oh baby, farming brought the microbial apocalypse. Living close to animals, goats, sheep, the occasional proto-cow, meant zoonotic diseases jumping ship faster than fleas at a dog park. Ever heard of smallpox great-granddaddy? Yeah, it was probably born in a Neolithic barn. Archaeological sites like Çatalhöyük show us the absurdity in high definition. These early towns were packed tight. Think less suburban cul-de-sac, more human sardine can. Houses shared walls, so your neighbor's snores, arguments, and questionable cooking smells were your surround sound nightmare. Why cram together? Safety, of course. Raiders, other humans with sharper spears and fewer morals, were a constant threat. Sleeping alone in your fancy new hut? Might as well hang a sign saying, "Free loot, come stab me." Groups meant shared guards, shared weapons, and shared grudges against the tribe across the river. And let's talk about those grudges. The Neolithic era birthed property disputes, humanity's first foray into, this land is my land, not your land. You spent months growing barley, only for some jerk named Thog to claim your field because his great-aunt once peed on that rock. Warfare got uglier, organized even. Evidence from sites like Jericho shows defensive walls, suggesting humans were already building fortresses to keep out other humans. Sleeping in groups wasn't just cozy, it was tactical. More bodies meant more defenders when Thog's cousins came knocking with clubs. But the pain. Oh, the pain of this era deserves its own sarcastic Oscar. Farming was backbreaking, literal backbreaking. Skeletons from Neolithic sites show spinal damage from grinding grain or hauling water. No chiropractors, just vibes, bad vibes, and nutrition, laughable. You traded a hunter's varied diet of meat and berries for a monotonous menu of grain porridge. Scurvy, anemia, and cavities became your new best friends. Teeth from Neolithic graves are a dentist's horror show, worn down from chewing gritty bread or rotted from malnutrition. Sleeping alone meant no one to share your measly harvest, so you starved quietly. In a group, you all starved together, but at least you could grumble about it. The irony here is deliciously absurd. Humans invented agriculture to make life easier, but it just swapped one set of terrors for another. Predators? Less of a problem now, thanks to dogs and walls. But disease? Rampant. Conflict? Escalated. And let's not forget the sheer exhaustion. You're up at dawn, tilling fields, chasing goats, fending off rats, only to collapse into a pile of sweaty, coughing kin at night. Privacy? A myth. Your sister's elbow in your ribs, your cousin's foot in your face. That's your sleep setup. Alone? You'd miss the chaos because chaos was survival. Speaking of chaos, let's dive into the social nightmare. The Neolithic saw the rise of hierarchy. Some genius decided he was chief because he had an extra goat. Suddenly, you're not just surviving nature, you're surviving politics. Chiefs demanded tribute, which meant handing over your best crops or facing exile. Exile, sleeping alone, death by starvation, raiders, or sheer loneliness. Sticking with the group meant swallowing your pride and kissing up to Chief Big Hat, whose hat was probably just a dead raccoon he called fashion. Historical evidence paints this with grim humor. At Skara Brae in Scotland, archaeologists found cozy stone houses, complete with stone furniture, but no indoor plumbing. Your toilet? A ditch outside, shared with the whole village. Imagine the midnight trek, torch in hand, praying a wolf doesn't mistake you for a snack. Sleeping in groups meant someone might spot the wolf before it spotted you. Alone, you're the main course in a furry feast. And the bugs, still a plague. Lice didn't get the memo about human progress. They thrived in those crowded huts, turning every nap into an itch fest. Group sleeping meant shared grooming. Picture your aunt picking nits out of your hair like a prehistoric spa day. Disgusting? Sure, but better than scratching yourself raw with no one to help. The psychological toll was a beast of its own. Modern anxieties got nothing on Neolithic stress. You're not just worried about crops failing, you're worried about God smiting you for a bad harvest. Early religions popped up, and with them, rituals to appease angry deities. Animal sacrifices, human sacrifices. Yeah, some places like Göbekli Tepe hint at rituals that make your skin crawl. Sleeping alone meant no one to wake you for the midnight appease the storm god ceremony. Missed that, and the village might blame you for the next flood. But let's inject some absurdity. Picture the daily grind. You're knee-deep in mud, planting seeds, while your kids run screaming from a rogue pig. Lunch is a handful of barley and a prayer it doesn't poison you. Evening? Argue with your neighbor over whose sheep crapped on whose doorstep. Night? Squeeze into the hut with 10 relatives, all smelling like sweat and despair. Romance? Forget it. Your date night is whispering sweet nothings over the sound of Uncle Grug's indigestion. And the animals, those domesticated pals, weren't exactly lassie. Early dogs were half wild, stealing your food as often as guarding it. Goats? They'd eat your crops, your clothes, your dreams. Sleeping near them for warmth was a gamble. Cozy 1 minute, coughing up sheep-borne plague the next. Yet, groups meant shared resources. One family's goat might feed everyone when your crops failed. Alone, you're eating dirt. The archaeological record keeps the sarcasm flowing. Skeletons from this era show signs of violence. Cracked skulls, arrow wounds. Humans weren't just fighting nature, they were fighting each other. Sleeping in groups meant alliances, shared grudges, and someone to patch you up when Thog's spear grazed your shoulder. Alone, you're bleeding out while the village debates who gets your hut. Let's zoom in on the absurdity of early settlements. Çatalhöyük's houses had no doors. You climbed in through the roof. Imagine rolling off your mat at 2 a.m., half asleep, trying not to fall through the ladder hole while a storm rages. Groups meant someone to catch you. Alone, splat. And the art, wall paintings of bulls, skulls plastered with clay, wasn't decor. It was a cry for meaning in a world that chewed you up and spat you out. Engaging you, dear viewer, imagine being there. Would you fight for your patch of dirt or kiss up to Chief Big Hat? Drop a comment. What's the one modern tool you'd smuggle into the Neolithic? A tractor? Antibiotics? Let's hear it. Your answers might save Zug's life. As we wrap this second dose of prehistoric pain, the irony stands tall. Farming was supposed to free humans, but it chained them to new horrors, disease, conflict, and the eternal itch of lice. Sleeping alone? Still a death wish, whether from raiders, rats, or just the crushing loneliness of a world that hated you. Next up, we'll leap into the Bronze Age, where metals made killing fancier, but sleeping alone still meant waking up dead, or not waking up at all. Stick around and comment below. What's the worst part of Neolithic life? The bugs, the chiefs, or the porridge? Let's keep the survival stories rolling. Welcome back to the grim chuckle fest of Why Cavemen Never Slept Alone. It Could Kill You. If the Neolithic was a mud-soaked soap opera of plagues and property feuds, the Bronze Age, around 3000 BCE, cranks the absurdity to 11 with shiny new metal toys and even shinier ways to die. Picture this. You're trying to catch a nap, but now it's not just wolves or lousy harvests. It's a chariot-riding warlord with a bronze dagger who thinks your village is prime real estate. Grab your imaginary shield, because we're diving into the sarcastic, painful, and downright ridiculous world of Bronze Age survival. Quick, drop a comment. What's the worst invention humanity's ever come up with? Let's see if it tops the Bronze Age's knack for making sharp things to stab each other with. So, the Bronze Age, humanity's glow up from sticks and stones to copper tin alloys that could slice through your dreams, and your torso. You're now Thok, a moderately successful farmer-trader in a bustling settlement like Uruk in Mesopotamia. Your hut's upgraded to mud brick with a side of ambition, but you're still sleeping cheek to jowl with your clan because, spoiler alert, sleeping alone is still a VIP pass to the underworld. Only now, the threats have leveled up like a video game designed by a sadist. It's not just nature anymore, it's organized chaos, complete with kings, taxes, and neighbors who'd rather raid than trade. Let's paint the scene. Your settlement's a maze of dusty streets buzzing with merchants, goats, and the occasional priest shouting about angry gods. Your bed? A straw mat, marginally less painful than a rock, but you're still crammed in with family, in-laws, and that one cousin who smells like fermented barley. Why stick together? Because the Bronze Age world is a glittering gauntlet of death, and solitude is just begging for a bad ending. From marauding bandits to freak floods, the universe is still laughing at your survival attempts. First up, the shiny new threat, warfare, now with extra pointy objects. Bronze swords, spears, and axes made killing a high art form. Archaeological digs, like those at Troy, show city walls scarred by sieges, proof humans were getting creative about wrecking each other's day. Sleeping alone in your hut? You might wake to a dagger at your throat from a rival tribe eyeing your grain stash. Or worse, you don't wake up at all. Sleeping in groups meant shared watch duties. Your brother's insomnia is your lifesaver when raiders sneak in at midnight. It's ironic. The same metal that made plows to feed you also made weapons to end you. But don't relax yet. Nature's still a jerk. The 4.2 kiloyear event, a fancy name for a megadrought around 2200 BCE, turned fertile lands into dust bowls. Crops withered, rivers dried, and your barley field? A sad patch of dirt. Starvation was a group activity. Share the pain, share the grain. Alone? You're gnawing on leather scraps while your neighbors divvy up the last goat. Excavations at sites like Mohenjo-Daro show signs of famine. Shrunken skeletons and abandoned cities. Sleeping together meant pooling resources. Solitude meant starving in silence. And disease. Oh, the microbial middle finger kept flipping. Living in tighter settlements with animals. Hello, goats again. Meant plague spread like gossip. The plague of Athens. Okay, a bit later, but you get the vibe. Shows how fast disease could gut a population. No antibiotics, no hand sanitizer, just prayers to gods who clearly weren't listening. Sleeping in groups, someone might notice you're feverish and drag you away from the sheep before you infect everyone. Alone? You're coughing your lungs out, hoping the gods take Venmo. The absurdity ramps up with society's new obsession, status. The Bronze Age birthed elites, kings, priests, and warriors who strutted around like they invented fire. You're slaving away, paying taxes in grain or goats to some guy in a bronze helmet who calls himself divinely appointed. Want to sleep alone to escape the noise? Tough luck. Exile for dodging taxes meant fending for yourself in the wilderness, where bandits or hyenas would make short work of you. Sticking with the group meant safety, even if it meant kowtowing to Lord Shiny Pants. Sites like Mycenae show elite graves stuffed with bronze goodies. Meanwhile, you're lucky if your straw mat doesn't have fleas. Speaking of fleas, the bug situation? Still horrific. Lice, bed bugs, and some new pals like fleas carrying plague vibes thrived in crowded towns. Group sleeping meant mutual delousing sessions. Romantic, right? Picture your aunt scraping bugs off your scalp by firelight, alone. You're itching yourself into insanity with no backup. It's the Bronze Age paradox. Civilization brought trade and tools, but also a buffet for parasites. The psychological grind was next level. Modern stress is a bad Wi-Fi signal. Bronze Age stress was, will my city burn down tonight? Religion got weirder. Think ziggurats and human sacrifices to appease sky gods who hated your crops. Sites like show temples where priests demanded your best sheep for divine protection. Skip the ritual because you slept alone? The village might stone you for angering the storm god. Groups kept you accountable. Someone's always poking you awake for the midnight chant. Let's zoom into the daily absurdity. Dawn. You're up, forging bronze tools or trading for them, because bartering's the new cardio. Lunch? Flatbread and maybe some fish if the river's not dried up. Afternoon? Dodge the tax collector while repairing your hut's roof after a storm. Night? Cram into the family pile, listening to your neighbor's epic snoring match. Romance? Ha! Your date is whispering over the kid's screams while a goat chews your sandal. Privacy? A fever dream. But that chaos was your lifeline. Alone, your prey for every bandit, beast, or bad vibe. Archaeological gems keep the sarcasm flowing. The Uluburun shipwreck off Turkey, loaded with bronze ingots and luxury goods, shows trade was booming, but so was piracy. Sleeping alone on your merchant trip? Say hello to a pirate's dagger. Groups meant hired guards, or at least cousins with clubs. And the skeletons. Oh, the skeletons. From Knossos to Harappa, they show battle scars, malnutrition, and teeth ground down by gritty bread. Life was a meat grinder, and sleeping alone was volunteering for the blades. The social scene was a circus of pain. Hierarchies meant sucking up to elites who hoarded the best stuff. Want a bronze spear? Better pledge loyalty to the local warlord. Defy him? You're out, sleeping under a bush, dodging wolves. Groups meant alliances. Your family's grudges became your shield. Alone? You're a nobody, and nobodies didn't last long. And the tech, bronze was a game changer, but not for comfort. Plows made farming faster, but also meant more work. Chariots? Cool, until they're charging at your village. Sleeping in groups meant shared labor. Someone's always fixing the plow while you stand guard. Alone? You're plowing and guarding and praying, all while starving. Let's sprinkle in some historical absurdity. Imagine the first guy who smelted bronze. Probably thought he was a god, until he realized it just meant more people wanted to rob him. Or the first chariot driver, feeling like a rock star until he crashed into a ditch. The Bronze Age was progress wrapped in a prank. Every step forward came with a new way to suffer. Engaging you, viewer, picture yourself in Thok's sandals. Would you barter your last goat for a bronze dagger, or just run screaming from the tax collector? Drop a comment. What's the one modern convenience you'd sneak into the Bronze Age? A fridge? A Netflix subscription? Let's hear it. Your ideas might save Thok from another bad day. The pain was relentless. Warfare meant constant fear. Your village could be ash by morning. Skeletons from Ban Chiang in Thailand show arrow wounds and smashed skulls. Disease? A daily dice roll. Malnutrition? Your kids' bones tell the tale. Rickets from vitamin D shortages. Sleeping alone amplified every risk. Groups spread the misery, but also the muscle to fight back. As we close this third slice of prehistoric madness, the irony shines brighter than a bronze sword. Humans built cities, forged metals, and still couldn't escape the need to huddle together like scared kids in a haunted house. Sleeping alone? A fantasy for fools, whether it was bandits, droughts, or just the crushing weight of a world that didn't care. Next, we'll plunge into the Iron Age, where sharper weapons and bigger empires made sleeping alone an even dumber idea. Stick around and comment below. What's the worst Bronze Age nightmare? The wars, the fleas, or the taxman? Let's keep the survival saga alive in the comments. Here we go, the grand finale of why cavemen never slept alone. It could kill you. If the Bronze Age was a chaotic circus of shiny daggers and drought-induced despair, the Iron Age, kicking off around 1200 BCE, turns the dial to apocalyptic. Picture yourself dozing off, only to be woken by a warlord with an iron sword sharper than your grandma's gossip, or a storm that drowns your village while you're dreaming of better days. Grab your metaphorical helmet, because we're plunging into the sarcastic, absurd, and brutally painful world of Iron Age survival. Quick, drop a comment. What's the one thing you'd never survive without in this era? A sword? A snack? Let's see if you'd outlast an Iron Age nightmare. Welcome to the Iron Age, where humans decided bronze was so last millennium and started forging iron, harder, cheaper, and perfect for crafting weapons to make your enemies regret existing. You're now Grog, a scrappy villager in a fortified hill fort, like those dotting ancient Europe or the Near East. Your home's a step up, stone walls, maybe a thatched roof, but you're still sleeping in a human pile with your family, because sleeping alone? That's like volunteering to star in a horror movie called Stabbed by Sunrise. The world's a forge of misery, and solitude is just fuel for the fire. Let's set the stage. Your hill fort's perched on a windswept ridge, surrounded by wooden palisades that scream, "We're terrified of our neighbors." Inside, it's a claustrophobic jumble of huts, livestock, and people who haven't discovered deodorant. Your bed? A pile of straw or animal hides, still itchy but marginally less infested than Neolithic mats. You're crammed in with your kin, snoring, farting, and muttering about the harvest, because the Iron Age is a gauntlet of new threats, and going solo is a death wish wrapped in stupidity. First, the shiny new terror, warfare, now with iron's razor-sharp edge. Iron swords and spears weren't just for show. They sliced through flesh like a hot knife through rancid butter. Archaeological sites like Maiden Castle in Britain show mass graves with skulls split by iron blades, proof that humans perfected the art of turning neighbors into kebabs. Sleeping alone in your hut? You're begging for a midnight raid by some Celtic warband who thinks your grain bin is their personal buffet. Sleeping in groups meant shared sentries. Your cousin's insomnia is your early warning system when torches flicker on the horizon. Ironic, isn't it? The metal that built stronger plows also built better ways to end you. Nature's still a cruel comedian, too. The Iron Age climate was a moody beast. Wet winters, scorching summers, and storms that could flatten your village faster than you could say, "Where's my roof?" The Little Ice Age was centuries off, but erratic weather wrecked crops with glee. Sites like Tel Es-Safi in Israel show signs of famine. Skeletons with brittle bones from starvation diets. Sleeping alone? You're hoarding your last scraps of barley, praying no one notices. In a group? You share the hunger, maybe even the last moldy crust. Misery loves company, and company keeps you alive. Disease? Still the Grim Reaper's favorite +1. Denser settlements meant more people, more animals, and more chances for plagues to party. No penicillin, just herbs and hope, both in short supply. Excavations at Iron Age sites like Glastonbury Lake Village show cramped living quarters, perfect for spreading whatever bug your goats brought home. Sleeping in groups meant someone might spot your fever before you croaked. Alone, you're sweating through your last night with no one to care. It's the ultimate irony. Civilization packed you closer but also made you a petri dish. The absurdity hits peak levels with social structures. The Iron Age birthed bigger hierarchies, kings, chieftains, and priests who acted like they were God's BFFs. You're slaving away, forging iron tools or herding sheep, only to hand over half your harvest to some guy in a fancy cloak who claims divine right. Defy him? Exile, aka sleeping alone in the woods, where wolves or bandits finish you off. Sticking with the group meant safety, even if it meant groveling to Lord Ironbeard. Graves from Hallstatt in Austria brim with elite goodies, iron swords, gold trinkets, while you're lucky if your cloak isn't moth-eaten. And the bugs, sweet mercy, the bugs. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs turned your straw bed into a parasite rave. Group sleeping meant delousing sessions. Imagine your uncle picking nits out of your hair like it's a bonding ritual. Alone? You're scratching yourself raw, praying for death over the itch. It's the Iron Age paradox. You're forging weapons that conquer empires, but losing battles to critters smaller than your fingernail. The psychological toll was a beast. Modern anxiety's a missed deadline. Iron Age anxiety was, will my village be a smoldering ruin by dawn? Religion got intense. Think druids sacrificing animals, or worse, to appease gods who seemed perpetually cranky. Sites like Stonehenge, still in use, hint at rituals to ward off disaster. Sleep alone? You miss the midnight chant and get blamed when the crops fail. Groups kept you in line. Someone's always nudging you awake for the don't anger the thunder god ceremony. Picture the daily grind dripping with sarcasm. Dawn, you're up, smelting iron or plowing fields with a blade that's more rust than metal. Lunch, bread and maybe some cheese if the rats didn't get it first. Afternoon, repair the palisade while dodging the chieftain's tax collector who wants your best pig. Night, squeeze into the hut with your smelly clan, listening to your neighbor's epic argument over whose cow broke the fence. Romance, whispering sweet nothings over the sound of a sheep bleating. Privacy, a cruel myth. But that chaos was your shield, alone your lunch for every raider, wolf, or bad storm. Archaeological evidence keeps the grim humor alive. The La Ten culture's graves in Europe are packed with iron weapons, swords, shields, even chariots, showing war was a lifestyle. Skeletons bear the marks, slashed bones, crushed skulls. At Daneberry Hill Fort, pits filled with grain suggest stockpiling for sieges, because nothing says good night like preparing for an invasion. Sleeping alone on a trade route, bandits or pirates, yes, they had those, would rob you blind. Groups meant guards, allies, and someone to stitch your wounds when the fight went south. The social circus was brutal. Hierarchies meant kissing up to chieftains who hoarded the best iron. Want a sword? Swear loyalty or trade your last cow. Rebel? You're out, sleeping under a tree, dodging arrows from your ex-friends. Groups meant strength. Your family's grudges were your armor. Alone? You're a ghost in a world that eats ghosts. Iron tech was a double-edged sword, literally. Better plows meant more food, but also more mouths to feed. Chariots and iron-tipped arrows made war faster, deadlier. Sleeping in groups meant shared labor. One guy forges, another guards, a third prays the crops don't fail. Alone, you're doing it all, collapsing under the weight of a world that doesn't care. Let's toss in some historical absurdity. Imagine the first guy to forge iron, thinking he's a genius, only to realize it just made his enemies deadlier. Or the warrior who got a fancy iron sword, only to trip and impale himself. The Iron Age was progress with a smirk. Every advance came with a new way to suffer. Engaging you viewer, picture yourself as Grog. Would you swing an iron sword at raiders or hide in the hut hoping they miss you? Drop a comment. What's the one modern gadget you'd bring to the Iron Age? A flashlight? Ibuprofen? Let's hear it. Your pick might keep Grog alive another day. The pain was relentless. War meant constant dread. Your hill fort could be ashes by morning. Skeletons from Wetwang Slack in England show spear wounds and broken bones. Disease? A daily gamble? Malnutrition? Your kid's stunted growth tells the story of vitamin shortages were the norm. Sleeping alone amplified every risk. Groups shared the misery, but also the muscle to survive. As we wrap this final chapter of prehistoric chaos, the irony gleams sharper than an iron blade. Humans built empires, forged weapons, and still couldn't escape the need to huddle together like rats in a storm. Sleeping alone? A fool's dream, whether it was raiders, plagues, or just the crushing loneliness of a world that chewed up heroes and spit out bones. And there you have it, the saga of why cavemen, from the Stone Age to the Iron Age, never slept alone. It wasn't about cuddly vibes, it was about surviving a world that wanted you dead. So next time you're tucked into your cozy bed, thank your ancestors for sticking together. Now, comment below, what's the worst part of Iron Age life? The wars, the bugs, or the chieftain's ego? Let's keep the survival stories alive, and maybe we'll dig into another era of human misery soon. Hey guys, picture this. You're a caveman shivering in a damp cave, the Ice Age wind howling like a pack of wolves, and your only blanket is a smelly mammoth hide that's more holes than hide. Yet somehow, you wake up without so much as a sniffle. How did our prehistoric pals survive brutal winters without modern medicine, central heating, or even a decent pair of socks? Buckle up for a wild ride into the frozen, absurd, and downright painful world of caveman survival, where staying alive was a daily miracle and getting sick wasn't an option. Before you settle in, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you're loving this dive into history's deep freeze. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm dying to know who's joining us from across the globe. Now, grab a hot drink, maybe wrap yourself in a blanket for irony's sake, and let's plunge into the icy nightmare of how cavemen slept through the cold without getting sick. Welcome to the Pleistocene, folks. Roughly 2.5 million to 11,700 years ago, a time when the world was a giant freezer, and humans were just scrappy underdogs trying not to become saber-toothed cat chow. The Ice Age wasn't a vibe, it was a survival gauntlet. Temperatures could plummet to minus 20 degrees Celsius or lower. Glaciers covered half of Europe, and the wind chill made every day feel like a personal vendetta from nature. Yet, our ancestors, let's call them Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and their cousins, didn't just survive. They thrived enough to eventually invent fire, tools, and, well, us. How? By mastering the art of not freezing to death or coughing up a lung in the process. Let's break down their secrets with a heavy dose of sarcasm for the sheer absurdity of their existence. First up, shelter, or as I like to call it, the original Airbnb with 0 stars. Cavemen didn't have cozy log cabins or insulated igloos. They had caves if they were lucky. A good cave, like those in France's Dordogne region, was prime real estate, dryish, wind-blocked, and roomy enough for your whole clan to huddle like sardines. But caves weren't always available. Some poor souls made do with rock overhangs, lean-tos slapped together from branches and hides, or even pits dug into the ground and covered with whatever wasn't frozen solid. Imagine the pain. You're curled up under a leaky roof of mammoth skin, the ground's frozen, and a draft keeps sneaking in like an uninvited guest. Survival. Tip number 1, pick your cave wisely, because a bad one meant hypothermia or a one-way ticket to pneumonia town. But shelter was just the start. The real magic happened with fire, humanity's cheat code against the cold. By 400,000 years ago, our ancestors had cracked the fire game. And it wasn't just for roasting bison. Fire was their radiator, their kitchen, their social hub. Keeping it lit was a full-time job, though. No matches, no lighters, just flint, pyrite, and a prayer to whatever proto-god they believed in. Archaeological sites like Cavemen Cave in Israel show hearths layered with ash, meaning these folks kept fires burning for weeks, maybe months. The trick? Sleep close enough to feel the warmth, but not so close you wake up as a human kebab. The smoke? Thick, choking, and probably shaved years off their lives, but it kept bugs away and dried out damp hides. Absurd trade-off. Breathe toxic fumes or freeze. Survival meant picking the lesser evil. Now, let's talk bedding, because cavemen didn't have memory foam or flannel sheets. Their beds were piles of leaves, grass, or constraint pine needles, topped with animal skins. Think deer, bear, or mammoth if you were fancy. Sites like Sibudu Cave in South Africa show evidence of bedding layered with aromatic plants like river wild quince, which doubled as insect repellent. Smart, right? But here's the catch. Those beds were crawling with fleas, lice, and who knows what else. You're not just sleeping, you're hosting a parasite party. And maintenance? Every few weeks you'd burn the bedding to kill the bugs, then start over. The pain. Imagine hauling armfuls of grass in sub-zero temp, Knowing your mattress is a health hazard. Survival meant getting cozy with itchiness. Body heat was another weapon. Cavemen didn't sleep alone. Oh no, they piled together like a prehistoric slumber party. Whole clans from granny to baby huddled under shared hides, sharing warmth and unfortunately germs. Neanderthals, with their stocky builds and barrel chests, were built for heat retention like human furnaces. Homo sapiens, skinnier, shakier, but clever enough to maximize group cuddles. The downside? If one person had a cough, everyone was getting it. But here's the kicker, their immune systems were tanks. Constant exposure to dirt, bugs, and raw meat made them resilient to infections that would floor us today. Absurd, right? Live in filth, get superpowers. Clothing was their portable shelter. By 170,000 years ago, Neanderthals were sewing, sort of. Bone needles found in caves like Denisova in Siberia suggest they stitched hides into fitted garments. Think fur-lined parkas, leggings, even primitive boots stuffed with grass for insulation. Wrapping feet in hide was a game changer. Frostbite was a death sentence. But sewing with sinew and bone needles? Slow, painful, and if you pricked yourself, good luck avoiding infection with no neosporin. The pain, every stitch was a battle, and a torn garment in midwinter could end you. Survival tip, don't skimp on the mammoth hide budget. Diet played a sneaky role in staying healthy. Cavemen weren't sipping bone broth for fun, they needed the calories. A hunter-gatherer diet was high fat, high protein. Think mammoth steaks, deer marrow, and whatever berries or roots they could scrounge. Fat was gold. It fueled their metabolism to generate heat, a process called thermogenesis. Sites like Blombos Cave show shellfish and fish in the mix, rich in omega-3s that boosted immunity. Starvation was the real enemy. If you didn't eat enough, your body couldn't fight the cold or infections. The absurdity, you're chasing a woolly rhino for days, knowing one wrong move means your dinner instead. Survival meant eating like a bodybuilder in a world with no grocery stores. Speaking of immunity, let's talk about why these folks didn't drop like flies from every bug. Their microbiomes were like the Avengers of bacteria, diverse, tough, and ready for war. Living in dirt, handling raw meat, and drinking from murky streams exposed them to pathogens daily, training their immune systems like a prehistoric boot camp. Genetic studies show Neanderthals had genes for fighting off infections we barely see today, like ancient versions of hepatitis. But no system was perfect. Skeletons from the era show signs of sinus infections, tooth abscesses, and joint issues from cold stress. The pain, every sneeze was a gamble, and a bad one could take you out. Survival meant trusting your gut. Literally, social bonds were their secret sauce. Cavemen didn't survive solo. They leaned on the tribe. Sharing food, fire, and warmth wasn't just practical, it was emotional. Storytelling around the fire, found in cave art from Lascaux to Chauvet, kept spirits up. Laughter, rituals, maybe even proto-songs helped them cope with the relentless cold. But betrayal? Deadly. Steal food or shirk fire duty, and you're out in the snow. The absurdity, your survival hinged on trusting people who might stab you over the last piece of elk. Comment, would you trust your clan to keep you warm, or go lone wolf? Let's hear it. Let's zoom in on Neanderthals, because they were the cold weather champs. Their short limbs, wide noses, and thick skulls were evolutionary armor against the Ice Age. Fossils from Shanidar Cave in Iraq show they cared for their sick. Broken bones healed, elders with arthritis fed. But don't romanticize it. They also practiced cannibalism, possibly ritualistic as seen in Krapina, Croatia. Survival meant eating anything, or anyone, when times got tough. The pain, love your neighbor, but maybe sharpen your flint just in case. Kids had it rough. Infant mortality was sky high. Skeletons suggest 30 to 40% didn't make it past 5. Cold weakened them, and no pediatricians existed. Mothers breastfed for years, boosting immunity, but once weaned, kids ate what adults did, raw, tough, and sometimes rancid. The horror. Imagine a toddler gnawing on frozen deer fat, shivering under a hide. Survival for kids meant growing up fast or not at all. Women faced extra challenges. Pregnancy in the Ice Age? Brutal. You're hauling wood, dodging predators, and praying the baby survives birth in a cave. Postpartum, you're back to work. No maternity leave. Menopause was rare, most didn't live past 30, yet women were vital. They gathered plants, tended fires, and likely knew medicinal herbs. Sites like Dolní Vistonec in the Czech Republic show female figurines, hinting at reverence, but also pressure to reproduce. The pain, your worth was tied to your womb, and the cold didn't care. Rituals helped cope. Cave paintings, bison, horses, handprints weren't just art, they were prayers for warmth, food, health. Shamans, if they existed, might have used herbs or chants to heal. No evidence of complex medicine, but crushed plants and burials suggest early pharmacology. Absurd. Rub a leaf on it and hope for the best. Tease for part 2. We'll dive into specific caves, tools, and the grim reality of frostbite. Plus, how did they avoid scurvy without a single orange? Comment. What's the craziest caveman survival trick so far? Would you sleep in a bug-infested leaf pile to stay warm? Keep watching. The Ice Age gets icier. Alright, you frostbitten time travelers. Welcome back to our bone-chilling saga of how cavemen slept through the Ice Age without catching every plague under the sun. Picture yourself huddled in a cave, the wind screaming like a banshee, your stomach growling louder than a cave bear, and your only defense against the cold is a ratty hide and sheer stubbornness. We're diving deeper into the gritty details, specific caves, clever tools, the gruesome reality of frostbite, and the mystery of how these folks dodged scurvy without ever seeing a lemon. Buckle up for another 2,000 plus words of prehistoric pain, absurdity, and survival hacks that'll make you grateful for your heated blanket. Let's get to it with all the sassy, ironic storytelling you're here for. Imagine you're in a cave in southern France, say Lascaux, around 17,000 years ago. It's not the Ritz, it's damp, it smells like wet mammoth, and the floor is a mix of dirt and bat guano. But it's home, and it's your best shot at not freezing solid. Lascaux wasn't just a shelter, it was a cultural hub, its walls painted with bison and deer, proof that cavemen had bigger worries than just staying warm. They needed meaning too. These caves were chosen for depth and protection. Deep chambers, like those in Chauvet, stayed above freezing even when the outside world was a popsicle. But here's the rub. Caves trapped smoke from fires, turning your lungs into a prehistoric chimney. Survival meant balancing warmth against asphyxiation. Absurd, right? You're either coughing up soot or shivering to death. Choose your poison. Other shelters were less glamorous. In Siberia's Malta Burik culture, about 24,000 years ago, folks built huts from mammoth bones and tusks, covered with hides. Sounds cool until you realize it took dozens of mammoth carcasses to make one house, and the stench of rotting hide was your air freshener. These structures were semi-permanent, meaning you drag your whole life there, only to abandon it when the herd moved. The pain, hauling bones in a blizzard, knowing your dream home smells like death. Survival tip, always camp near a mammoth graveyard, because who has time to hunt that many? Tools were cavemen's lifeline against the cold. Flint knives found everywhere from Germany's Vogelherd cave to South Africa's Claisies River were razor sharp for skinning animals. You'd flay a deer, scrape the hide clean, a job that could take days, and pray it didn't tear. Bone needles like those in Denisova cave let you sew hides into cloaks or boots, but threading sinew through a needle with frozen fingers? Torture. And don't forget fire-making tools, flint and pyrite for sparks, or bow drills for the fancy. Sites like Beech's Pit in England show fire pits with charred bones, meaning they roasted meat and warmed their bones simultaneously. The absurdity, you're a master craftsman, but one fumbled spark and you're back to square one, freezing. Frostbite was the silent killer. Imagine your toes turning black after a hunt gone long. No hospitals, no painkillers, just you, a flint blade, and a tough call. Skeletons from the era, like those at Sungir in Russia, show missing toes or fingers, likely amputated to stop gangrene. No anesthesia, maybe a stick to bite or a swig of fermented berry juice if you were lucky. The pain, hacking off your own digit in a cave, hoping you don't bleed out. Survival meant acting fast because infection was a death sentence. And if you lost too many fingers, good luck throwing a spear. Neanderthals, with their robust bones, fared better, but even they weren't immune. Fossils from La Ferracie in France show signs of frostbite scars. Now, let's tackle the scurvy mystery. Scurvy, caused by vitamin C deficiency, wrecks your gums, joints, and will to live. Today we grab an orange. Cavemen, no citrus in sight, yet they dodged it, mostly. How? Their diet was a patchwork of genius and desperation. Organ meats, like liver, were vitamin C gold mines. A single reindeer liver could keep a clan scurvy-free for weeks. Sites like Grotta du Ren show Neanderthals ate heart, kidney, even stomach contents of herbivores. Gross, but packed with nutrients. Plants help too. Rose hips, pine needles, and wild berries, when available, were chewed raw or steeped in hot water over the fire. The absurdity: you're slurping half-digested grass from a deer's stomach to avoid bleeding gums. Survival meant eating what modern US would gag at. Water was another hurdle. Frozen streams meant chipping ice or melting snow over the fire. Energy intensive when you're already starving. Contaminated water? Common. Skeletons show signs of waterborne parasites like Giardia, which meant diarrhea in a world with no toilet paper. The pain: you're dehydrated, freezing, and now sprinting into the snow for privacy. Survival tip: boil your water if you can, but don't expect it to taste like Evian. Hygiene, or lack thereof, was a double-edged spear. Cavemen didn't have soap, but they weren't total slobs. They used ash from fires to scrub skin, as seen in residue at El Cedron Cave in Spain. Teeth? Cleaned with twigs or chewed on bark, which doubled as an antiseptic. But lice were a constant roommate. Fossils from S3xual have lice eggs in hair samples. Bathing in icy rivers? Only for the brave or desperate. The absurdity: you're rubbing ash on your face to feel clean, while fleas throw a rave in your armpit. Survival meant embracing the grime, because a strong immune system thrived on exposure. Speaking of immunity, let's dive deeper. Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens interbred, sharing genes like HLA variants that fought off ancient pathogens. Studies from the Max Planck Institute showed these genes helped them tackle bacteria we've never even heard of. But wounds were brutal. Cuts from skinning animals or falls on ice got infected fast. Skeletons from Kostenki in Russia show healed fractures but also abscesses that likely killed. Herbal knowledge was emerging. Chewed plants like yarrow, found in Neanderthal dental plaque at El Cedron, suggest they knew basic medicine. The pain: a toothache could end you, and your only doctor is a shaman with a handful of leaves. Survival meant chewing through the agony. Social structure kept them alive. Clans of 10 to 30 people shared everything: food, warmth, misery. Division of labor was key. Men hunted, women gathered and tended fires, though roles blurred in tough times. Sites like Terra Amata in France show communal hearths, meaning everyone pitched in to keep the flame alive. Betrayal, though? A clan member hoarding food could doom the group. Punishment was swift. Exile into the tundra was worse than death. The absurdity: you're sharing your last scrap of fat with Uncle Gronk, who might have eaten your cousin last winter. Comment: would you share your mammoth steak or hide it? Spill your survival strategy. Kids were the clan's future, but raising them was a nightmare. Breastfeeding lasted years. Skeletons show worn teeth from prolonged nursing, but cold, weakened infants. Mothers wrapped babies in hides, carrying them close, but a sick kid often didn't make it. Burials at La Madeleine in France show kids with grave goods, hinting at love but also loss. The pain: watching your child shiver, knowing you can't do more. Survival for kids meant clinging to mom's warmth and hoping for spring. Women's role was brutal but vital. Beyond childbirth, they processed hides, gathered fuel, and likely led rituals. Venus figurines, like those at Willendorf, suggest fertility worship, but also pressure to pop out heirs. Menopause was rare, but older women, if they survived, were knowledge banks. Herb lore, fire tricks, storytelling. The absurdity: you're a walking encyclopedia, but one bad winter and you're expendable. Rituals gave meaning to the madness. Cave art, like Altamira's bison, wasn't just decor. It was a plea for survival. Shamans, if they existed, used trance dances or herbs to heal, as hinted by ochre-stained bones in burials. No proof of complex religion, but they believed in something, maybe spirits in the wind or animals. The pain: you're praying to a painted deer while your toes freeze off. Survival meant faith in the unseen. Tease for Part 3. We'll explore migration patterns, how they tracked herds to stay warm, and the grim reality of starvation winters. Plus, did they have prehistoric saunas? Comment, what's the gnarliest Ice Age survival hack so far? Could you stomach deer? Stomach juice. Keep watching. The cold gets colder. Welcome back, you frost-resistant history nerds, to our third installment of how cavemen somehow slept through the Ice Age without turning into human icicles or coughing their lungs out. Picture yourself trudging through a snowstorm. Your only shoes are hide strips tied with sinew, and you're chasing a herd of reindeer because starvation is scarier than frostbite. We're diving into the nomadic grind of migration patterns, the brutal reality of starvation winters, and the tantalizing question, did these folks stumble onto prehistoric saunas to beat the cold? It's another 2,000 plus words of survival, absurdity, and the sheer pain of living in a world where a warm day was 0 degrees Celsius. Let's keep the fire lit with our signature sarcastic storytelling and plunge back into the frozen madness. Migration was the caveman's lifeblood. These folks weren't Netflix and chilling in one cave forever. They followed the herds, mammoth, reindeer, bison, because food meant survival, and food didn't stay put. Archaeological sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, dated to 26,000 years ago, show seasonal campsites, meaning clans moved with the seasons. Spring and summer? Follow the herds north as glaciers retreated, grazing on fresh tundra. Winter? Head south or hunker down in a sheltered valley. The pain. Imagine trekking hundreds of miles, kids in tow, carrying everything, hides, tools, half-rotten meat, while dodging wolves and ice patches. One wrong step, and you're a fossil. Survival tip, know your herd's migration route like it's your GPS, because a missed turn meant an empty stomach. Tracking herds wasn't just about food, it was about warmth. Animal hides were their winter wardrobe, and bones fueled their fires. Sites like Mezhmyskaya Cave in Russia show piles of mammoth bones burned for heat when wood was scarce. A single mammoth could provide enough hides for a tent and fuel for weeks, but hunting one? A nightmare. You're a 5-foot-tall human with a flint-tipped spear, facing a 10-ton beast with tusks longer than your ego. Cave art from Rufinyak shows these hunts, with stick-figure hunters looking way too calm. The absurdity, you're risking death for a fur coat you have to skin yourself. Survival meant mastering the art of not getting trampled. Starvation winters were the ultimate test. When game vanished and plants froze, clans faced months of lean times. Skeletons from Sunghir, Russia, show signs of malnutrition, stunted growth, brittle bones, especially in kids. To survive, they ate anything. Bone marrow scraped from cracked femurs, fish from half-frozen rivers, even roots dug from permafrost with antler picks. Sites like Kostenki reveal caches of stored nuts and seeds, proof they planned ahead, but storage was a gamble. Mold or rodents could wipe out your stash. The pain, you're gnawing on a frozen root, teeth aching, knowing it's not enough to keep you warm. Survival meant rationing like a miser and praying for an early thaw. Now, about those prehistoric saunas. Did they exist? Not exactly, but some clever tricks came close. In Ukraine's Mazurich, 15,000 years ago, archaeologists found mammoth bone huts with central hearths, tightly sealed with hides. These could trap heat like a sweat lodge, especially if you piled on the fire. Some speculate they used hot stones heated in the fire and placed in hide-lined pits with water to create steam. No direct evidence, but ethnographic parallels with later Arctic cultures suggest it's plausible. Imagine the scene. You're steaming in a bone hut, sweating next to your cousin, while the wind howls outside. Absurd? Totally. But it kept you warm and maybe killed some skin bacteria. Survival tip. If you're sweating in a cave, you're winning. Fire management got sophisticated. At Abric Romani in Spain, hearths show layered use, different woods for different purposes. Hardwoods like oak burned slow for overnight warmth. Pine sparked fast but died quick. They'd bank fires with ash to keep embers alive, saving precious energy. But a dead fire in midwinter? Catastrophic. You're back to striking flint in the dark, fingers numb, clan glaring at you for screwing up. The pain. One guy's mistake could freeze the whole group. Survival meant never letting the flame die, even if it meant sleeping with one eye open. Clothing evolved with migration. As clans moved, they adapted to local animals. In Siberia, reindeer hides were lighter but warmer than mammoth. In southern Europe, deer sufficed. Bone awls from Grotta du Rennes show intricate stitching. Think tailored parkas, not just draped pelts. Footwear was critical. Sites like Tianyuan Cave in China reveal hide moccasins stuffed with grass, like prehistoric Uggs. But wet hides froze stiff, and drying them by the fire risked cracking. The absurdity: you're sewing boots with a bone needle, knowing one puddle could ruin them. Survival meant constant repairs, because bare feet in snow equaled gangrene. Frostbite's horror lingered. Beyond amputations, chronic cold stress left marks. Skeletons from La Chapelle-aux-Saints show arthritis from repeated exposure. To prevent it, they smeared fat on skin as hinted by ochre fat mixes in burials. Think bear grease as proto-vaseline, sealing in warmth. But fat was scarce, and harvesting it meant wrestling a carcass in sub-zero temps. The pain: you're rubbing rancid grease on your face, hoping it saves your nose. Survival meant getting greasy or losing limbs. Diet's role deepened. To fight infections, they needed more than vitamin C. Bone broth, simmered in hide pouches with hot stones, was a nutrient bomb. Collagen, minerals, and warmth in one. Sites like Aubry-Patal in France show scorched stones likely used for boiling. Seaweed found in coastal caves like Pinnacle Point added iodine and vitamin A, boosting thyroid function for heat production. The absurdity: you're sipping slimy seaweed soup to avoid goiter while a storm rages outside. Survival meant choking down whatever kept you ticking. Water remained a pain point. Melting snow was slow, and ice chunks carried dirt or parasites. Some clans, like those at Malta, dug shallow wells near rivers, filtering water through gravel. But Giardia and other bugs still struck. Skeletons show intestinal damage. The pain: you're melting snow with your last embers, only to get the runs in a blizzard. Survival meant gambling on every sip. Social dynamics got brutal in winter. Clans shrank as food dwindled. Burials from this period show higher mortality in cold months. Sharing was non-negotiable, but tensions flared. Artifacts from Sungir include ornaments, suggesting status fights even in lean times. Hoard food: you're exiled. Steal a hide: you're dead. The absurdity: you're cuddling for warmth with someone you might have to shank over a fish. Survival meant playing nice, even when you didn't feel it. Kids faced harsher odds on the move. Migration meant carrying infants, who couldn't regulate body heat well. Mothers used hide slings, as hinted by wear patterns on female skeletons. But cold snaps killed fast. Graves at Lagar Velo in Portugal show kids buried with care, but too many. The pain: wrapping your baby tighter, knowing it might not be enough. Survival for kids meant mom's warmth and luck. Women's burdens grew. Pregnant during a trek? You're waddling through snow, hoping the baby waits. Childbirth on the move was deadly. Pelvic stress fractures in female skeletons tell the tale. Yet women led foraging, spotting edible lichens or bark when game was scarce. The Venus of Brasempouy, a carved head, hints at their reverence, but also their role as life-givers under pressure. The absurdity: you're a goddess, but one bad hunt and you're just another mouth to feed. Rituals kept spirits up. Portable art, carved mammoth ivory from Malta, shows animals and humans, likely talismans for safe travels. Some burials include red ochre, possibly blood symbols to ward off death. Shamans, if real, led chants or dances, as hinted by rhythmic wear on cave floors. The pain: you're dancing to appease spirits while your stomach's empty. Survival meant believing the next hunt would succeed. Health hacks evolved. Dental plaque from Neanderthals at Spy Cave in Belgium shows poplar bark, a natural aspirin. They chewed it for pain, frostbite, toothaches, or injuries, but infection still killed. Skeletons show septicemia scars. The absurdity: you're chewing tree bark like it's Tylenol, hoping it works before gangrene sets in. Migration spread genes too. Interbreeding with Neanderthals, seen in DNA from a Away's cave in Romania, gave Homo sapiens cold-adapted traits. But it wasn't all cozy. Skeletons show violent clashes over territory. The pain: you're sharing genes and spears with the same folks. Survival meant alliances, even with rivals. Tease for part 4. We'll wrap with how they adapted to warming climates, their legacy in modern survival, and were they healthier than us? Comment: could you survive a starvation winter or a mammoth hunt? What's the wildest ice age trick so far? Stay tuned, the finale thaws the mystery. Welcome back, you ice-hardened survivors, to the final chapter of our frostbitten epic on how cavemen slept through the ice age without succumbing to the sniffles or turning into human popsicles. Imagine you're curled up under a mammoth hide, the glaciers are starting to melt, and you're wondering if you'll ever see a warm day, or if you'll just get eaten by a cave lion first. In this 2,000+ word finale, we're tackling how our ancestors adapted to warming climates, the legacy they left for modern survival, and the big question: were these gritty folks actually healthier than us? With our usual mix of sarcasm, historical absurdity, and the raw pain of prehistoric life, let's wrap this saga and thaw out the mysteries of the Ice Age. As the Pleistocene wound down around 11,700 years ago, the world started to warm, glaciers retreated, and the Ice Age gave way to the Holocene. Sounds cozy, right? Not so fast. The thaw was a chaotic mess: floods from melting ice, unpredictable weather, and animals like mammoths going extinct, leaving hunters scrambling. Sites like Starcar in England, dated to around 8,500 BCE, show clans adapting to wetlands, building wooden platforms to stay dry. But warmer didn't mean easier. You're still sleeping in a soggy hut, mosquitoes the size of your fist buzzing around, and your old mammoth hide tricks are obsolete. The pain: just when you master the tundra, nature flips the script. Survival meant reinventing your whole lifestyle on the fly. Shelter evolved fast. Caves were still used, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, though later hints at transitional stone structures, but many clans went mobile. At Pinsevent in France, archaeologists found tent-like structures with hearths made from branches and hides, easy to pack up as clans chased new game like deer or boar. These weren't luxury glamping sites. Think leaky roofs, damp floors, and the constant threat of collapse. Fire remained king, but wet wood smoked worse than a chimney fire. The absurdity: you're hauling a tent across a swamp, praying it holds up, all to sleep in a puddle. Survival tip: master the art of quick setup, because a wet bed meant chills and fever. Clothing got lighter but no less labor-intensive. With mammoths gone, clans turned to smaller animals: fox, rabbit, deer, for hides. Sites like Ohalo 2 in Israel show flax fibers, hinting at early woven fabrics, but don't picture cozy sweaters. These were rough, itchy, and took forever to make. Bone needles from Udinovo, Russia, show finer stitching, suggesting tailored tunics or leggings. But summer heat brought new problems. Sweat-soaked hides bred bacteria, and no deodorant existed. The pain: you're sewing a shirt with a fishbone needle, knowing it'll stink by noon. Survival meant staying cool without exposing yourself to sunburn or bugs. Diet shifted with the climate. Big game dwindled, so clans leaned harder on plants, fish, and small animals. Natufian sites in the Levant show grinding stones for wild grains, proto-bread basically, and fish hooks for river catches. But plants were a gamble. Some were toxic, and trial and error wasn't fun. Skeletons from Abu Huraira show tooth wear from gritty plant diets, plus signs of anemia from low meat intake. No more mammoth fat feasts meant leaner times, and vitamin deficiencies crept in. The absurdity: you're grinding barley with a rock, hoping it's not poison, just to avoid starvation. Survival meant becoming a botanist with no guidebook. Health took a hit as climates changed. Warmer weather bred new pathogens. Mosquitoes thrived in wetlands, carrying diseases like malaria. Skeletons from Catalhoyuk, an early settlement, show signs of parasitic infections absent in colder times. But cavemen adapted. They chewed medicinal plants: willow bark for pain, chamomile for digestion, as seen in dental plaque from Shanidar Cave. No pharmacies, so they relied on instinct and luck. The pain: a fever in a world with no Tylenol, and your only doctor is a guy with a painted rock. Survival meant trusting nature's pharmacy, even when it tasted like dirt. Were they healthier than us? Here's the kicker: in some ways, yes. Their microbiomes were Olympic level, thanks to constant exposure to dirt, raw food, and unfiltered water. Genetic studies from the Max Planck Institute show Neanderthal and early Homo sapiens genes for fighting ancient bugs we've lost. Their diets, when food was plentiful, were nutrient-dense. No processed junk, just pure protein and plants. Skeletons show strong bones from constant activity, unlike our desk jockey osteoporosis risks. But don't romanticize it. Life expectancy hovered around 30. Tooth abscesses, seen in fossils from Dmanisi, Georgia, killed as often as predators. No antibiotics meant a cut could be fatal. The absurdity, they were fitter than us, but one bad tooth and you're done. Comment, would you trade modern medicine for a caveman's immune system? Let's hear it. Frostbite faded as a threat, but new dangers emerged. Warmer climates meant more human contact, spreading diseases. Burials from School Cave in Israel show early signs of tuberculosis-like infections. Injuries didn't stop. Hunting boar was as risky as mammoth, with smaller rewards. Skeletons from Mladec in the Czech Republic show spear wounds, likely from territorial fights as clans competed for new lands. The pain, you're dodging spears from neighbors who want your fishing spot. Survival meant fighting for every scrap of territory. Social bonds remained critical. As clans grew, some hitting 50 to 100 people in early settlements like Jericho, cooperation got complex. Sharing food and warmth was still non-negotiable, but status emerged. Burials with beads or tools, like at Sungir, show some got better graves. Women's roles shifted. They led plant gathering and early farming, as seen in seed caches at Netiv Hagdud. But childbirth stayed deadly. Pelvic fractures and female skeletons scream of brutal deliveries. The absurdity, you're planting the first crops, but one bad birth could end you. Survival meant leaning on the group, even as hierarchies formed. Kids faced new challenges. Warmer climates helped, but malnutrition lingered as diets shifted. Child burials at La Madeleine show fewer grave goods, suggesting less hope for survival. Mothers still breastfed for years, boosting immunity, but weaned kids ate gritty grains, wrecking teeth. The pain, watching your kid chew rocks disguised as food, knowing they might not make it. Survival for kids meant growing tough fast. Rituals evolved with the thaw. Cave art gave way to portable carvings. Think Venus figurines or animal totems from S3xual, Turkey. These weren't just art, they were prayers for fertility, food, health. Shamans likely led ceremonies using ochre and herbs, as seen in burials at Ainon. No written records, but rhythmic wear on settlement floors hints at dances to appease spirits. The absurdity, you're dancing for rain while mosquitoes eat you alive. Survival meant clinging to hope, even if it looked silly. Tools got fancier. Microliths, tiny flint blades from sites like Frenchthie Cave, made hunting and cutting easier. Sickles for harvesting wild grains appeared, but they dulled fast and sharpening meant hours of grinding. The pain, you're crafting tools with bleeding hands knowing they'll break by next week. Survival meant constant innovation, no days off. The legacy? Huge. Their fire tricks inspired hearths in every culture. Hide clothing led to weaving, then fashion. Their plant knowledge birthed agriculture. Thank them for your morning toast. Immunity genes from Neanderthal interbreeding still help us fight viruses, per DNA studies. Even their art lives on. Think cave paintings influencing modern murals. But the cost? A life of relentless toil where a cold night or bad hunt meant death. The absurdity, they invented survival, but we're the ones whining about Wi-Fi. Final reflection, imagine being a caveman in the thaw. You've survived blizzards only to face floods. Your mammoth hides are useless. Your clan's fighting over soggy land, and a mosquito bite might kill you. Yet you adapt. New tools, new foods, new shelters. That's the real caveman miracle. Not just sleeping through the cold, but outsmarting a world that wanted them dead. From Lascaux's art to Natufian grains, they laid the groundwork for us, scars and all. Comment challenge. What's the one caveman trick you'd steal from modern life? Fire skills, hide boots, or stomach juice soup? Could you hack it in the Ice Age for a day? Share below. This series lived on your vibes. Imagine the Ides of March, 44 BC, Julius Caesar, the conqueror of Gaul, dictator for life, strutting into the Senate like he owns the place. Because, let's face it, he basically does. But in the shadows, his friends are sharpening their daggers, plotting the ultimate backstab. This isn't just a bad day, it's the worst week in history, filled with betrayal, omens ignored, and enough political drama to make your head spin. Welcome to Julius Caesar's worst week, betrayal, backstabbing, and bad hair days, where we dive into the hilarious horror of ancient Rome's most infamous meltdown. And hey, if you've ever had a week where everything went wrong, drop a comment below. What's your worst betrayal story? Let's see if it tops getting stabbed 23 times by your pals. Ancient Rome. That glittering cesspool of ambition where togas hid daggers and every handshake could be your last. Picture Julius Caesar at the peak of his power. He's just crossed the Rubicon, slapped down Pompey, and declared himself perpetual dictator. The man's got Gaul under his belt, Egypt in his pocket, thanks to a fling with Cleopatra, and a calendar named after him. But success in Rome is like wearing a target on your back, or in Caesar's case, on his increasingly balding head. Yes, folks, even the mighty Caesar had bad hair days, combing over that receding hairline like it was a state secret. But his worst week? It starts not with a bang, but with a whisper of conspiracy, building to a bloodbath that still makes us wince. Let's rewind to the days leading up to March 15th. It's early March, and Rome's buzzing like a hornet's nest poked with a laurel wreath. Caesar's been riding high since his triumphs. Those over-the-top parades where he flaunts captured kings and exotic beasts. But beneath the cheers, there's grumbling. The senators, those stuffy patricians in their pristine togas, are seething. Dictator for life? That's not the Republic way. They mutter over their garum-soaked dinners. Brutus, that brooding idealist with mommy issues, his ancestor overthrew the last king after all, is nursing a grudge deeper than the Tiber. And Cassius? Skinny, scheming Cassius with his lean and hungry look. Shakespeare's words, but spot on. He's the instigator, whispering sweet nothings of tyranny into ears already itching for rebellion. Caesar, oblivious or arrogant, take your pick, is dealing with his own pains. The man's pushing 55, ancient by Roman standards, where life expectancy hovered around 30 if you dodged plagues and poisoned wine. His epilepsy, those falling sickness seizures, hits at the worst times, like during a public sacrifice, where he collapses foaming at the mouth. Talk about a bad omen. But does he heed it? Nah, Caesar's too busy being divine. The Senate's voted him godlike honors, statues in temples, his face on coins. First living Roman to get that ego boost. Yet, survival in Rome means navigating a minefield of flattery and fatality. One wrong step, and you're chum for the fish in the Tiber. Enter the absurdity, omens everywhere, screaming danger like a bad horror flick. A soothsayer, that creepy fortune teller, grabs Caesar in the street. Beware the Ides of March. Caesar chuckles, brushes him off. The Ides are come, he says later, all smug, but the soothsayer retorts, aye, but not gone. Ouch! Then there's Calpurnia, his wife, having nightmares of blood gushing from statues, the Senate roof caving in. She begs him not to go. In a world where women were seen and not heard, unless they were Vestal virgins or scheming like Livia later on. Calpurnia's plea is a rare moment of vulnerability. But Caesar, he's got a meeting. Priorities. The pain of survival kicks in hard. Rome's no picnic, streets slick with sewage, air thick with smoke from sacrifices and unwashed masses. Caesar's marching through it all, his laurel wreath hiding that thinning hair, but inside, the stress just is killer. Rumors of plots swirl like the forum's pigeons. His friends Brutus and Cassius are recruiting. Decimus, the traitor who ate at Caesar's table. Trebonius, the smooth talker. Even Casca, the cynic who'd stab first. They're a motley crew of 60-odd conspirators, bound by oaths and outrage. Liberty, tyranny is dead, they'll shout later, but right now it's hush-hush planning in dimly lit villas, hearts pounding with the fear of discovery. One leak and it's off to the executioner. Or worse, crucifixion for slaves, beheading for citizens. Historical absurdity abounds. Caesar, the military genius who outmaneuvered Gauls and pirates, can't spot a coup in his own backyard. He's pardoned enemies left and right. Brutus fought for Pompey, yet Caesar made him praetor. Generosity or hubris. Either way, it's biting him in the toga. Meanwhile, Rome's a hotbed of superstition. Birds refusing to eat entrails at auguries, lions breaking free in the streets. The gods are practically neon signing abort mission. But Caesar, ever the rationalist, except when claiming descent from Venus, waves it off. Cowards die many times before their deaths, he quips, borrowing from future bard Shakespeare. As the week unfolds, tension builds like a storm over the Capitoline Hill. Caesar's hosting dinners, schmoozing senators, all while the plot thickens. Imagine the irony. He's planning to leave for Parthia in days, to avenge Crassus and expand the empire, but his own senate's about to prune the family tree. The pain? Constant vigilance. Bodyguards? He dismissed them. Better to die once than live in fear. Brave words from a man whose epilepsy could strike any time, leaving him vulnerable. In a city where poison was a dinner guest and assassins lurked in alleys, survival meant allies. But Caesar's alienating them, stacking power like Jenga blocks ready to topple. Dive deeper into the sarcasm. Rome, cradle of civilization, where plumbing's a luxury but backstabbing's an art form. Aqueducts bring water but can't wash away the blood. Caesar's reforms, land for veterans, citizenship for provincials, are progressive, but to traditionalists, blasphemy. He's making us like those barbaric Gauls. They whine, forgetting Caesar's commentaries painted him as hero, them as savages. The absurdity, he's fixing the calendar, Julian baby, adding days to sync with the sun, but can't fix his fate. March 15th looms, and the conspirators are sweating. Literally, in Rome's humid clime, where malaria mosquitoes buzz like bad omens. Engage with this madness. If you were Caesar, would you heed Calpurnia's dreams or strut to the Senate? Drop a comment. What's the worst advice you've ignored? Let's compare notes on historical hubris. The build-up's excruciating. March 13th. Caesar dines with Lepidus, joking about death. Swift and sudden, he says. Foreshadowing much. March 14th. More omens. A kingfisher shredded by birds, symbolizing his crown torn apart. Calpurnia wakes screaming. She clings to him. Don't go. For a moment he wavers, sends Antony to dismiss the Senate. But Decimus arrives, mocking his uxoriousness, wife whipped Roman style. What, shall the Senate wait on a woman's dreams? Ego stung, Caesar heads out. The pain of patriarchy, even dictators bow to peer pressure. As he walks to Pompey's theater, irony, his rival's building, the soothsayer nods knowingly, a petitioner thrusts a note. The plot revealed, but Caesar pockets it, unread, busy man. Inside, the senators rise, respect or ruse. Trebonius distracts Antony outside. Casca strikes first. Speak! Hands for me! Daggers flash. Caesar fights, grabs Casca's arm, but they're everywhere. Brutus last. Et tu, Brute? The ultimate betrayal from the man he treated like a son. 23 wounds, but only one fatal, they say. He falls at Pompey's statue base, blood pooling like his ambitions. But wait, that's the climax? His worst week? It's the prelude's slow burn, the absurdity of ignored signs, the pain of trust shattered. Rome erupts, mobs riot, conspirators flee. Antony's funeral speech twists the knife. Brutus is an honorable man, drips sarcasm. Civil war brews, Octavian rises. Caesar's legacy? Empire from Republic's ashes, but at what cost? The Ides horror echoes, power's a double-edged gladius. Yet the sarcasm lingers. Caesar, balding conqueror, felled by friends in a bad hair week. His calendar outlives him. We still use it, tweaked by popes. Absurd, right? Survival in Rome meant dodging daggers daily, but Caesar's arrogance sealed it. As we pause this first act of Roman tragedy, remember, history's a nightmare we wake from, laughing or crying. Stick around for part 2. The conspirators' fallout, more betrayals, and Rome's bloody hangover. Comment below, who do you side with, Caesar or Brutus? Let's debate in the comments. Your take might change history's verdict. Alright, welcome back to the blood-soaked soap opera of Julius Caesar's worst week. Betrayal, backstabbing, and bad hair days. The Ides of March have just turned Rome's golden boy into a human pincushion, with 23 stab wounds courtesy of his so-called friends. But the real chaos? It's just getting started. Picture this. Rome's streets are erupting, mobs are torching everything, and the conspirators are realizing that killing Caesar was the easy part. Surviving the fallout is the real nightmare. Grab your toga and brace for the sarcastic, absurd, and painfully brutal aftermath of Rome's most infamous week. Quick, drop a comment. What's the worst decision you've ever made that backfired spectacularly? Let's see if it beats Brutus and Cassius thinking they'd be heroes for stabbing their boss. The curtain rises on March 16th, 44 BC, and Rome's a powder keg with a lit fuse. Caesar's body lies cold at the base of Pompey's statue, his blood soaking the Senate floor like a bad omen in liquid form. The conspirators, Brutus, Cassius, Decimus, and their gang of dagger-happy senators are high on adrenaline, shouting, "Liberty! Tyranny is dead!" as they wave their bloody hands. They think they've saved the Republic, restored the good old days when senators argued over wine instead of dodging dictators. Spoiler alert, they've just poured oil on Rome's already flammable politics, and the fire's about to consume them all. Let's set the scene. Rome's a sprawling mess of marble temples, stinking alleys, and gossip that spreads faster than plague. The forum's buzzing with panicked citizens, merchants, slaves, patricians, all whispering about Caesar's murder. The conspirators march to the Capitoline Hill, barricading themselves in a temple to Jupiter, because nothing says we're in control like hiding behind a god statue. Brutus, ever the idealist, thinks he can speechify his way to glory. "We killed Caesar for Rome," he declares, expecting applause. Instead, he gets a city ready to riot. The pain of survival in Rome? It's not just dodging daggers, it's dodging the mob's torches. The absurdity kicks in hard. These guys plan the assassination like pros. 60 conspirators, synchronized stabs, even a backup plan to ditch Antony. But the aftermath? Zero prep. It's like throwing a party, forgetting the food, and wondering why everyone's mad. Cassius, the brains of the operation, is sweating through his toga. He's a lean and mean scheming machine, but even he didn't anticipate Rome's love for Caesar. The same plebs who grumbled about taxes were now weeping for their dictator, who'd given them bread and circuses. Historical irony. Caesar's reforms, land for the poor, debt relief, made him a rock star to the masses, while the elite saw him as a crown-wearing wannabe king. Enter Mark Antony, stage left, with a smirk that could curdle milk. He's Caesar's loyal attack dog, a party boy with a knack for survival and a tongue sharper than an iron gladius. Antony plays nice at first, shakes hands with the conspirators, even gets Caesar's will from Calpurnia. But he's plotting, and oh boy, does he deliver. At Caesar's funeral, he steps up to the rostra, clutching the will like a loaded slingshot. The crowd's restless, ready to burn something. Antony's speech, immortalized by Shakespeare but rooted in Plutarch's accounts, is a masterclass in sarcasm and manipulation. Brutus is an honorable man, he says over and over, each repetition dripping with venom. He waves Caesar's bloody toga, points to the stab wounds. "This one's from Brutus, your honorable friend." The crowd roars, ready to tear Rome apart. The pain of this week is visceral. For the conspirators, it's the dawning horror that they're not heroes, they're public enemy number one. Brutus, who genuinely believed he was saving the Republic, watches his dream crumble as mobs set fire to senators' houses. Cassius, the pragmatist, is already calculating escape routes. Decimus, the ultimate traitor who dined with Caesar hours before the Ides, is probably regretting not staying in Gaul. Survival in Rome now means dodging bricks thrown by angry plebs who don't care about liberty when their free grain's at risk. Archaeological evidence backs this chaos. Burnt layers in Rome's forum from this period scream mob rage. Meanwhile, the absurdity piles up. Caesar's will, read by Antony, is a bombshell. He left his gardens to the public, 300 sesterces to every citizen, basically bribing Rome from beyond the grave. The plebs go wild, building a pyre in the forum to cremate him, tossing in furniture, clothes, anything flammable. It's less a funeral, more a rock concert gone wrong. The conspirators, holed up on the Capitoline, can smell the smoke and hear the screams. Their grand plan? Looking dumber by the minute. They thought killing Caesar would end tyranny. Instead, it's birthed anarchy. The social circus is a nightmare. Rome's class system, patricians, plebs, slaves, is a tinderbox. The elite want the Republic back, but the plebs loved Caesar's handouts. Antony's stirring the pot, knowing chaos is his ticket to power. And then there's Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old great-nephew lurking in the wings. He's in Apollonia when he hears the news, a skinny kid with big dreams and Caesar's name in his pocket. Spoiler, he'll become Augustus, Rome's first emperor, but right now he's just a wild card nobody's watching. The pain of survival? Navigating the snake pit of loyalties where today's ally is tomorrow's assassin. Let's inject some historical sarcasm. Imagine Brutus, the noble Stoic, realizing his Save Rome pitch flopped harder than a bad playwright's debut. Or Cassius, who spent years hating Caesar's swagger, now facing a city that loved it. The conspirators' plan was like betting against the house in a rigged game. Rome's too hooked on Caesar's charisma, and the omens keep coming. Comets streak the sky, interpreted as Caesar's soul ascending or the god's middle finger to the conspirators. Either way, Rome's superstitious masses eat it up in the killer's PR campaign tanks. The daily grind is pure chaos. March 17th, the conspirators negotiate with Antony, who's playing them like a liar. He gets control of Caesar's papers, his legions, his legacy. Brutus tries another speech, noble, boring, full of republic buzzwords. The crowd yawns, then throws rocks. By March 18th, the conspirators are fleeing Rome, some to their estates, others to the provinces. Cassius heads east, Brutus to Greece, Decimus to Gaul. Survival means running, but Rome's reach is long and Caesar's ghost, metaphorically at least, is chasing them. The absurdity deepens with the Senate's response. They declare Caesar a tyrant but don't punish the killers. Classic Roman fence-sitting. They grant amnesty, but Antony's stirring up the plebs, and Octavian's sailing back to claim his inheritance. The conspirators' victory lap lasts about as long as a Roman candle. Their pain? Knowing they've traded one dictator for a power vacuum that'll birth worse. Civil wars brewing, and they're the kindling. Engage with this mess, viewer. If you were in Rome, would you join Antony's mob, flee with Brutus, or bet on young Octavian? Drop a comment. What's the worst group project you've been part of? Did it end in metaphorical daggers? Let's compare betrayals. The archaeological record keeps the sarcasm sharp. Inscriptions from this period show Rome's elite scrambling to pick sides. Coins minted later bear Caesar's face, proof his legacy outlived his killers. Skeletons from later battles, Philippi, Actium, show the cost. Broken bones, arrow wounds. The conspirators thought they'd save Rome. Instead, they lit the fuse for empire. The psychological toll is crushing. Brutus, torn between honor and survival, knows he's betrayed a friend. Cassius, the plot's architect, sees his chessboard crumbling. Antony's thriving on chaos, but even he's sweating. Caesar's shadow looms large. For the plebs, it's fear and fury. No Caesar, no bread. Sleeping alone this week? Suicide. You need allies, guards, someone to watch your back while Rome burns. As we wrap this second act of Rome's bloody drama, the irony stings. Killing Caesar was supposed to free the Republic, but it shackled Rome to chaos. The conspirators are running, Antony's scheming, and Octavian's plotting. Sleeping alone, metaphorically or literally, means death in a city where loyalty shifts like sand. Next, we'll dive into the conspirators' desperate flight, Antony's power grab, and Octavian's rise as Rome spirals into civil war. Stick around and comment below. Who's the bigger snake, Antony or Cassius? Let's keep the betrayal train rolling in the comments. Buckle up for the third act of Julius Caesar's worst week. Betrayal, backstabbing, and bad hair days. The Ides of March have left Caesar a bloody footnote. Rome's streets are a riot-fueled dumpster fire, and the conspirators are learning that stabbing your way to freedom comes with a nasty hangover. Picture this. It's spring 44 BC, and the Republic's crumbling faster than a stale Roman loaf. Antony's playing the mob like a liar. A teenage Octavian is sharpening his ambitions, and the assassins are running for their lives, togas flapping in the wind. Welcome to the sarcastic, absurd, and painfully chaotic spiral of Rome's post-Caesar meltdown. Quick, drop a comment. What's the worst time you've had to run from a mess you made? Let's see if it tops Brutus and Cassius dodging an entire city's wrath. It's late March, 44 BC, and Rome's a circus where the clowns are armed, and the lions are the audience. The conspirators, Brutus, Cassius, Decimus, and their dagger-wielding posse thought killing Caesar would crown them heroes. Instead, they're the most hated men in Rome, scurrying out of the city like rats from a sinking trireme. Brutus heads to Greece, Cassius to the east, Decimus to Gaul. Each praying distance will save them from the mob's pitchforks and Antony's schemes. The pain of survival? It's not just escaping Rome. It's realizing you've traded one tyrant for a civil war that's about to make the Ides look like a bad hair day. Let's paint the scene. Rome's Forum is a smoldering mess. Caesar's makeshift pyre still smokes, built from chairs, togas, and the plebs' undying love for their fallen dictator. The streets reek of sewage, sweat, and fear, with graffiti cursing the conspirators scrawled on temple walls. Outside the city, hilltop villas burn as mobs take revenge on anyone vaguely anti-Caesar. The conspirators' plan to save the Republic is now a bad joke, and they're the punchline. Survival means dodging not just knives, but the weight of their own hubris. Turns out, assassinating the guy who paid for the bread and circuses wasn't the PR win they expected. The absurdity is thicker than garum sauce. Brutus, the brooding philosopher with a family legacy of kingslaying, thought he'd be hailed as Rome's savior. Instead, he's dodging rotten vegetables and death threats. Cassius, the wiry mastermind who orchestrated the plot, is rethinking his life choices as he sails east, wondering if Parthia's deserts are safer than Rome's streets. Decimus, who betrayed Caesar after sharing his wine, is probably cursing his own greed. Gaul's legions might be loyal, but they loved Caesar too. Historical irony. These guys spent years fighting Caesar's enemies, only to become the enemies themselves, hunted by the very republic they swore to protect. Mark Antony's the real shark in this bloody pool. He's got Caesar's will, his legions, and a silver tongue that could charm a Vestal virgin into breaking her vows. Antony's playing every angle, consoling Calpurnia, rallying the plebs, and sweet-talking the Senate into keeping him alive. He's consul, technically in charge, but Rome's a tinderbox, and he's tossing in sparks. His funeral speech flipped the script, turning Caesar into a martyr and the conspirators into traitors. Now he's consolidating power, seizing Caesar's treasury to fund legions and buy loyalty. The pain? Even Antony's sweating. Every step's a gamble in a city where loyalty flips faster than a denarius. Then there's Octavian, the wild card nobody saw coming. Caesar's adopted heir, a scrawny 18-year-old with a chip on his shoulder and a name worth more than gold. He lands in Italy, fresh from Apollonia, and starts calling himself Caesar. Bold move for a kid who's never swung a sword. He's got no army, no office, just a claim to Caesar's legacy and a knack for playing the long game. The absurdity? While Antony's brawling in the streets and the conspirators are running, Octavian's quietly recruiting veterans, flashing Caesar's name like a VIP pass. Survival for him means staying alive long enough to outsmart the old dogs. The social chaos is a gladiator pit. Rome's class system, patricians sneering at plebs, plebs hating senators, slaves dodging everyone's boots, is fracturing. The plebs want Caesar's handouts back. The elite want their republic, minus the dictator. Antony's riding the mob's anger, but even he knows they could turn on him if the grain runs out. The Senate, spineless as ever, tries to play both sides. Amnesty for the killers, honors for Caesar. It's like refereeing a chariot race where all the drivers are drunk. Archaeological finds, like inscriptions from this period, show senators hedging bets, praising Caesar while secretly funding Brutus. Cowards. The pain of survival is relentless. For the conspirators, it's the paranoia of being hunted. Brutus in Greece hears whispers of legions loyal to Antony. Cassius in Syria scrambles to secure troops before Antony's forces arrive. Decimus in Gaul faces mutiny from Caesar's old soldiers, who'd rather avenge their general than follow a traitor. Every shadow's a threat, every courier a potential spy. For the average Roman, it's worse. Riots mean no food, no safety. Markets shut, grain ships stall, and the Tiber's banks are lined with looters. Sleeping alone? A death sentence. You need allies, guards, or at least a locked door to survive the night. Historical sarcasm drips like blood from a gladius. Imagine Brutus, the noble assassin, writing philosophical letters about honor while hiding from assassins of his own. Or Cassius, who mocked Caesar's ambition, now begging for coins to fund his army. The gods must be laughing. Comets still blaze in the sky, seen as Caesar's soul or divine wrath. Superstitious Romans eat it up, painting the conspirators as cursed. Temples overflow with offerings to appease Jupiter, but no one's appeasing the mob. The daily grind is a nightmare. March 20th, Antony's seizing control, issuing edicts in Caesar's name. The conspirators scattered send desperate letters to allies. Brutus tries rallying Greece's elites, but they're wary. Caesar's ghost looms large. Cassius strong-arms Syrian governors for cash and troops. Decimus fortifies Gaul, but his men are grumbling. By March 25th, Rome's Senate is a farce. Half the senators are fleeing, the rest bickering over who's in charge. Antony's strutting, but Octavian's arrival throws a curveball. The kid demands his inheritance, and veterans start whispering his name. Survival's a chess game, and every move's a risk. The absurdity peaks with Rome's bureaucracy. Caesar's death didn't stop the paperwork. Taxes, laws, and land grants grind on. Antony's forging Caesar's signature on decrees, claiming it's what the boss wanted. Meanwhile, the conspirators are branded traitors but can't be touched, yet. It's Roman politics at its finest. Backstab, lie, repeat. Coins from 44 BC, dug up centuries later, show Caesar's face, not Brutus. His legacy's winning, even from the grave. Engage, viewer. If you were in this mess, would you back Antony's charisma, Brutus's ideals, or Octavian's sneaky ambition? Drop a comment. What's the worst power struggle you've seen? Did it end in chaos or just bad vibes? Let's compare Rome's drama to your own. The archaeological record keeps the sarcasm flowing. Burnt villa remains in Italy's countryside show the mob's reach. Mass graves from later battles, like Philippi, where Brutus and Cassius will face their doom, hint at the cost. Shattered bones, arrowheads lodged in spines. The conspirators thought they'd rewrite history. Instead, they're footnotes in Caesar's epic. The psychological toll is a beast. Brutus, torn by guilt, sees Caesar's ghost in his dreams. Plutarch's words, not just Shakespeare's. Cassius, the cynic, knows he's outmaneuvered. Antony's riding high but paranoid. Octavian's a threat he can't ignore. The plebs, starving, scared, and ready to riot again. In Rome, trust is a luxury no one can afford. As we close this third chapter of Rome's bloody saga, the irony cuts deep. The conspirators killed Caesar to save the Republic, but they've unleashed a beast, civil war, with Antony and Octavian circling like vultures. Sleeping alone in spirit or body is suicide in a city where betrayal's the only constant. Next, we'll chase the conspirators to their doomed stand, watch Antony and Octavian clash, and see Rome reborn from the ashes of ambition. Stick around and comment below. Who's got the best shot at winning this mess? Antony, Octavian, or nobody? Let's keep the Roman roulette spinning in the comments. Here we go, the final act of Julius Caesar's worst week. Betrayal, backstabbing, and bad hair days. The Ides of March are dust, Rome's a smoldering wreck, and the conspirators are scattered like roaches under a torch. Antony's riding high on mob fury, Octavian's plotting like a teenager with a grudge, and the Republic's gasping its last breaths. Picture this, it's spring 44 BC, and the stage is set for a civil war bloodier than a gladiator pit. Grab your sandals and brace for the sarcastic, absurd, and gut-wrenchingly painful climax of Rome's most chaotic week. Quick, drop a comment. What's the worst betrayal you've seen go down? Let's see if it tops Brutus's knife or Octavian's sneaky power grab. It's April 44 BC, and Rome's a pressure cooker ready to explode. The conspirators, Brutus, Cassius, Decimus, and their band of backstabbers, are fugitives, holed up in far-flung provinces, clutching their ideals while dodging assassins. Antony strutting as Rome's de facto boss, wielding Caesar's legacy like a club. But Octavian, that scrawny kid with Caesar's name, is stealing the spotlight, turning veterans into his personal fan club. The Republic? It's a corpse, and everyone's fighting over the funeral rites. Survival in Rome means picking a side, or running until your sandals wear out. The pain? Knowing every choice leads to a battlefield. Let's set the scene. Rome's streets are a maze of looted shops, burned villas, and graffiti screaming, "Death to the liberators." The Forum's a ghost town, save for the occasional mob torching a senator's statue. Temples overflow with panicked offerings. Jupiter's altar is drowning in goat blood, but the gods aren't picking up. Outside Rome, the provinces churn. Greece, Syria, Gaul, all buzzing with armies mustering for war. The conspirators' dream of a free republic is deader than Caesar, and their only hope is raising legions to fight Antony, and now Octavian. The absurdity? They killed one man to save Rome, only to set it on fire. Brutus is in Greece playing philosopher king to a skeptical crowd. He's got his mother's stoic grit. Servilia was no pushover, but his speeches about liberty are falling flatter than unleavened bread. He's raising troops, raiding cities for cash, and writing letters full of noble drivel that mask his panic. Cassius in Syria is better at the game, strong-arming governors for gold and soldiers. He's a lean, mean survival machine, but even he knows the odds suck. Decimus, stuck in Gaul, is losing his grip. Caesar's old legions are mutinying, loyal to the dead dictator's name. The pain of survival? Every day's a gamble, and the house always wins. Antony's riding a wave of chaos, but it's a wobbly surfboard. He's got Caesar's treasury, his legions, and a knack for rallying the plebs with promises of bread and vengeance. But he's overplaying his hand, forging Caesar's decrees, taxing Rome to death, and alienating the Senate. His consulship gives him power, but it's a ticking clock. By summer, he's clashing with Cicero, that silver-tongued senator who's penning speeches, the Philippics no less, calling Antony a drunk tyrant. Historical sarcasm. Antony, who turned Caesar's funeral into a riot, is now shocked that Rome's ungovernable. His pain? Knowing Octavian's creeping up, stealing his thunder. Octavian, the ultimate dark horse, is rewriting the script. He's 18, no military cred, but Caesar's adoption makes him a god to the veterans. He lands in Brundisium, flashes his new name, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, and starts recruiting like a startup CEO. By May, he's got legions, cash, and a growing fan base. The absurdity? This kid who'd be carded at a Roman tavern is outmaneuvering grizzled warlords. He's cozying up to Cicero, who thinks he can control the boy. Spoiler, Cicero's wrong. Octavian's survival strategy is pure cunning. Smile, nod, and plot while everyone underestimates you. The social circus is a bloodbath. Rome's classes are at war. Plebs riot for grain. Patricians hoard gold. Slaves dream of freedom but get crushed underfoot. The Senate's a mess. Half are pro-Antony, half back the conspirators, all terrified of Octavian's rise. Cicero's speeches rally the old guard, but they're shouting into a void. Archaeological finds, like coins from 43 BC, show Octavian's face popping up beside Caesar's, cheeky branding for a kid with no resume. The pain? No one trusts anyone. Allies today are enemies tomorrow, and every dinner invitation could hide a poisoned cup. The daily grind is relentless. April 10th. Antony's seizing provinces, declaring the conspirators outlaws. Brutus and Cassius scramble, begging allies for support. Decimus fights mutinies in Gaul, his men chanting Caesar like a curse. Octavian marches on Rome, demanding consulship, because why not? He's got the audacity of youth and Caesar's ghost on speed dial. By June, Rome's Senate is caving, torn between Antony's muscle and Octavian's charm. The plebs? Starving, rioting, praying for stability that won't come. Survival means dodging knives, literal and figurative, in a city where loyalty's a myth. Historical absurdity abounds. Imagine Brutus penning stoic essays while his troops loot Greek towns to fund his war, or Cassius, who hated Caesar's swagger, now mimicking it to rally Syrian legions. Decimus, once Caesar's buddy, is betrayed by his own men. Poetic justice. And Antony? He's parting with Cleopatra's envoys, dreaming of Egypt's gold, while Rome burns. Omens keep the sarcasm flowing. Comets still light the sky, wolves howl in the Forum, and priests report statues weeping blood. Romans eat it up, blaming the conspirators for angering the gods. The pain is brutal. For the conspirators, it's the terror of being hunted. Every messenger could be an assassin, every ally a spy. Brutus sees Caesar's ghost. Plutarch swears it's true, a specter of guilt haunting his sleep. Cassius, ever pragmatic, knows they're doomed but fights anyway. Decimus faces desertion, his legion slipping away. Antony's losing allies to Octavian's charm offensive, his power crumbling under his own arrogance. Octavian? He's got the least pain, just ambition and the stress of playing innocent while plotting empire. For the plebs, it's hunger, fear, and the crushing weight of a city eating itself. Engage, viewer. If you were in this chaos, would you fight for Antony, bank on Octavian, or sail off with Cassius? Drop a comment. What's the sneakiest power move you've pulled or seen? Let's see if it matches Octavian's hustle. The archaeological record keeps the irony sharp. Mass graves from Philippi, 42 BC, loom on the horizon. Skeletons with sword cuts, proof of the coming bloodbath. Coins from 44 BC still bear Caesar's face, mocking the conspirators' failure. Burnt settlements in Italy show the mob's wrath, while inscriptions praise Octavian as Caesar's heir. The conspirators wanted to erase Caesar. Instead, they've immortalized him. The psychological toll is a dagger to the soul. Brutus, torn by honor and betrayal, knows he's fighting a lost cause. Cassius, the cynic, sees the end but can't stop. Antony's ego blinds him to Octavian's threat. Octavian, cool as a cucumber, hides his ruthlessness behind a boyish grin. The plebs? They're just trying to eat, praying the next ruler brings grain instead of war. In Rome, trust is a death trap, and sleeping alone, literally or figuratively, means waking up dead. As we wrap this final chapter of Rome's blood-soaked saga, the irony cuts deeper than an iron gladius. Caesar's death was meant to save the Republic, but it birthed an empire. The conspirators are doomed, Antony's overplaying his hand and Octavian's poised to win it all. By 43 BC, the Second Triumvirate, Antony Octavian Lepidus forms, hunting the conspirators to Philippi's bloody fields. Brutus and Cassius will fall, Decimus is already toast, and Rome's republic dies with them. Caesar's ghost laughs last, his name etched on an empire that outlives them all. And there you have it, the full tragedy of Julius Caesar's worst week, from ignored omens to a civil war that reshaped history. The pain, the absurdity, the betrayals, it's Rome at its messiest, proving power's a game where everyone loses something. So, next time you're dodging a bad day, thank the gods you're not in 44 BC. Comment below, who's the ultimate winner? Octavian's cunning, Antony's charisma, or Caesar's ghost? Let's keep the Roman drama alive in the comments, and maybe we'll dig into another ancient mess soon. Word count, 2014. Here we go, the final act of Julius. Caesar's worst week, betrayal, backstabbing, and bad hair days. The Ides of March are dust, Rome's a smoldering wreck, and the conspirators are scattered like roaches under a torch. Antony's riding high on mob fury, Octavian's plotting like a teenager with a grudge, and the Republic's gasping its last breaths. Picture this, it's spring 44 BC, and the stage is set for a civil war bloodier than a gladiator pit. Grab your sandals and brace for the sarcastic, absurd, and gut-wrenchingly painful climax of Rome's most chaotic week. Quick, drop a comment. What's the worst betrayal you've seen go down? Let's see if it tops Brutus's knife or Octavian's sneaky power grab. It's April 44 BC, and Rome's a pressure cooker ready to explode. The conspirators, Brutus, Cassius, Decimus, and their band of backstabbers, are fugitives, holed up in far-flung provinces, clutching their ideals while dodging assassins. Antony's strutting as Rome's de facto boss, wielding Caesar's legacy like a club. But Octavian, that scrawny kid with Caesar's name, is stealing the spotlight, turning veterans into his personal fan club. The Republic? It's a corpse, and everyone's fighting over the funeral rites. Survival in Rome means picking a side, or running until your sandals wear out. The pain? Knowing every choice leads to a battlefield. Let's set the scene. Rome's streets are a maze of looted shops, burned villas, and graffiti screaming, "Death to the liberators." The Forum's a ghost town, save for the occasional mob torching a senator's statue. Temples overflow with panicked offerings. Jupiter's altar is drowning in goat blood, but the gods aren't picking up. Outside Rome, the provinces churn, Greece, Syria, Gaul, all buzzing with armies mustering for war. The conspirators' dream of a free republic is deader than Caesar, and their only hope is raising legions to fight Antony, and now Octavian. The absurdity? They killed one man to save Rome, only to set it on fire. Brutus is in Greece, playing philosopher king to a skeptical crowd. He's got his mother's stoic grit. Servilia was no pushover, but his speeches about liberty are falling flatter than unleavened bread. He's raising troops, raiding cities for cash, and writing letters full of noble drivel that mask his panic. Cassius in Syria is better at the game, strong-arming governors for gold and soldiers. He's a lean, mean survival machine, but even he knows the odds suck. Decimus, stuck in Gaul, is losing his grip. Caesar's old legions are mutinying, loyal to the dead dictator's name. The pain of survival? Every day's a gamble, and the house always wins. Antony's riding a wave of chaos, but it's a wobbly surfboard. He's got Caesar's treasury, his legions, and a knack for rallying the plebs with promises of bread and vengeance. But he's overplaying his hand, forging Caesar's decrees, taxing Rome to death, and alienating the Senate. His consulship gives him power, but it's a ticking clock. By summer, he's clashing with Cicero, that silver-tongued senator who's penning speeches, the Philippics no less, calling Antony a drunk tyrant. Historical sarcasm. Antony, who turned Caesar's funeral into a riot, is now shocked that Rome's ungovernable. His pain? Knowing Octavian's creeping up, stealing his thunder. Octavian, the ultimate dark horse, is rewriting the script. He's 18, no military cred, but Caesar's adoption makes him a god to the veterans. He lands in Brundisium, flashes his new name, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, and starts recruiting like a startup CEO. By May, he's got legions, cash, and a growing fan base. The absurdity? This kid who'd be carded at a Roman tavern is outmaneuvering grizzled warlords. He's cozying up to Cicero, who thinks he can control the boy. Spoiler, Cicero's wrong. Octavian's survival strategy is pure cunning. Smile, nod, and plot while everyone underestimates you. The social circus is a bloodbath. Rome's classes are at war. Plebs riot for grain. Patricians hoard gold. Slaves dream of freedom but get crushed underfoot. The Senate's a mess. Half are pro-Antony, half back the conspirators, all terrified of Octavian's rise. Cicero's speeches rally the old guard, but they're shouting into a void. Archaeological finds, like coins from 43 BC, show Octavian's face popping up beside Caesar's, cheeky branding for a kid with no resume. The pain? No one trusts anyone. Allies today are enemies tomorrow, and every dinner invitation could hide a poisoned cup. The daily grind is relentless. April 10th, Antony's seizing provinces, declaring the conspirators outlaws. Brutus and Cassius scramble, begging allies for support. Decimus fights mutinies in Gaul, his men chanting Caesar like a curse. Octavian marches on Rome, demanding consulship, because why not? He's got the audacity of youth and Caesar's ghost on speed dial. By June, Rome's Senate is caving, torn between Antony's muscle and Octavian's charm. The plebs? Starving, rioting, praying for stability that won't come. Survival means dodging knives, literal and figurative, in a city where loyalty's a myth. Historical absurdity abounds. Imagine Brutus, penning stoic essays while his troops loot Greek towns to fund his war, or Cassius, who hated Caesar's swagger, now mimicking it to rally Syrian legions. Decimus, once Caesar's buddy, is betrayed by his own men, poetic justice. And Antony, he's partying with Cleopatra's envoys, dreaming of Egypt's gold while Rome burns. Omens keep the sarcasm flowing. Comets still light the sky, wolves howl in the Forum, and priests report statues weeping blood. Romans eat it up, blaming the conspirators for angering the gods. The pain is brutal. For the conspirators, it's the terror of being hunted. Every messenger could be an assassin, every ally a spy. Brutus sees Caesar's ghost. Plutarch swears it's true. A specter of guilt haunting his sleep. Cassius, the cynic, knows they're doomed but fights anyway. Decimus faces desertion, his legion slipping away. Antony's losing allies to Octavian's charm offensive, his power crumbling under his own arrogance. Octavian? He's got the least pain, just ambition and the stress of playing innocent while plotting empire. For the plebs, it's hunger, fear, and the crushing weight of a city eating itself. Engage, viewer. If you were in this chaos, would you fight for Antony, bank on Octavian, or sail off with Cassius? Drop a comment. What's the sneakiest power move you've pulled or seen? Let's see if it matches Octavian's hustle. The archaeological record keeps the irony sharp. Mass graves from Philippi, 42 BC, loom on the horizon. Skeletons with sword cuts, proof of the coming bloodbath. Coins from 44 BC still bear Caesar's face, mocking the conspirators' failure. Burnt settlements in Italy show the mob's wrath, while inscriptions praise Octavian as Caesar's heir. The conspirators wanted to erase Caesar. Instead, they've immortalized him. The psychological toll is a dagger to the soul. Brutus, torn by honor and betrayal, knows he's fighting a lost cause. Cassius, the cynic, sees the end but can't stop. Antony's ego blinds him to Octavian's threat. Octavian, cool as a cucumber, hides his ruthlessness behind a boyish grin. The plebs? They're just trying to eat, praying the next ruler brings grain instead of war. In Rome, trust is a death trap, and sleeping alone, literally or figuratively, means waking up dead. As we wrap this final chapter of Rome's blood-soaked saga, the irony cuts deeper than an iron gladius. Caesar's death was meant to save the Republic, but it birthed an empire. The conspirators are doomed, Antony's overplaying his hand, and Octavian's poised to win it all. By 43 BC, the Second Triumvirate, Antony, Octavian, Lepidus forms, hunting the conspirators to Philippi's bloody fields. Brutus and Cassius will fall, Decimus is already toast, and Rome's republic dies with them. Caesar's ghost laughs last, his name etched on an empire that outlives them all. And there you have it, the full tragedy of Julius Caesar's worst week, from ignored omens to a civil war that reshaped history. The pain, the absurdity, the betrayals, it's Rome at its messiest, proving power's a game where everyone loses something. So, next time you're dodging a bad day, thank the gods you're not in 44 BC. Comment below, who's the ultimate winner? Octavian's cunning, Antony's charisma, or Caesar's ghost? Let's keep the Roman drama alive in the comments, and maybe we'll dig into another ancient mess soon.